So, hello everyone. In this discussion, we'll be discussing about GS Paper 1. And I shall be discussing questions related to your art and culture, ancient medieval history, post-independence, and modern history. So, total 6 questions were asked from these portions. So, we'll be taking up those questions. So, first question is, how will you explain the medieval Indian temple sculptures represent the social life of those days? Okay? So first let's underline what are the important pointers which has been asked. First thing is, we have to just explain here. Okay, so we don't have to discuss it. We don't have to give any kind of critical information. We don't have to discuss like, no, they did not depict the social life. We don't have to contradict this statement. We have to just follow what is given, what the statement which is given in the question. So explain medieval India. So medieval India, although it is not a very hard line, timeline division, we can interpret in more lenient format, almost like after generally Chola period, it is considered medieval history, but still pre-medieval is also a term, so we can take from 600 AD onwards, 600, 800 AD onwards. Indian sculptures. Okay? So the question is about Indian sculptures, not Indian architecture. Okay? Indian temple sculptures, not temple architecture. So specifically, we have to talk about the sculptures here. Okay. Social life of those days. Social life of those days. Okay. So in the introduction part, we will break this answer in introduction. Second will be the body, and 2-3 lines we can also devote for conclusion. Okay. So in introduction part, we can write that sculptures were an artistic way of expressing various cultural, ideological, and social realities of a particular period. Okay? The use of various cultures of deities, Navagrahas, like 9 planets, then statues of Yakshini, then river goddesses, then Mithunas. Mithunas were basically erotic sculptures. So these were various iconography which were used in Indian temple styles. Okay? Now, then second part will come to the body part. Ki how these sculptures represented the reality. So, देखा जाए, we have to cook an answer. First thing is, assimilation of local culture with mainstream. How? You see, in India, there were generally a few important gods and goddesses, but various sculptures for regional variation, some sculptures of local gods were created, and based upon the Indian mythology, that particular local god is an incarnation of Lord Shiva or Lord Vishnu. For example, in Jagannath temple, generally if you see in Jagannath temple, Lord Jagannath Subhadra, and Baldao. They are worshipped. So basically it is a depiction that how local variations, how these sculptures actually assimilated local features with unifying features. So Lord Jagannath is considered as the incarnation of Lord Vishnu. ठीक है, तो पहली चीज assimilation of local diversity. Assimilation of local diversity. Then second is अब इसमें एग्जाम्पल में यू कैन राइट अबाउट जगन्नाथ टेम्पल ऑफ पुरी, उड़ीसा. Then second, progressive nature of society. Progressive nature of society. Example, Khajuraho. And how the erotic sculptures of Khajuraho were depicted in such a radical form. ठीक है? Sensuality was accepted in the society back then. It was not a kind of taboo for anyone. So these sculptures, these erotic sculptures, which were very radical, ठीक है, of Khajuraho, they were depicted with more openness. ठीक है? तो एक हो गया progressive nature of society, Khajuraho. Then third thing we can write about patriarchy of society. How these sculptures reflect patriarchy. First thing, most of the sculptures which were created, which were sculpted, they belong to the male gods, male deities, not female deities. And even if the female deities were depicted, they were generally depicted in a way to reflect the male superiority. ठीक है? Male superiority. The patriarchal mindset of society was existing back then. We can write this without any offense. ठीक है? Like for example, in the Shavatar temple of Vishnu, Lord Vishnu is depicted in Anantashayan Mudra, and Lakshmi ji is sitting beside Vishnu. ठीक है? So that we can create this, that patriarchal mindset was also transmitted through these sculptures. ठीक है? Then Saptamarika, there was a sculpture of Saptamarika also, where 7 mothers are depicted along with the main deity. So the size of the male deity is bigger than those Saptamarikas, the 7 mothers. ये लिख सकते हैं. Then influence of bhakti cult on society. Bhakti cult on society. And with the influence of bhakti cult, the worship of Rama sculptures of Rama and Krishna came into existence. Before, generally Vishnu temples, Vishnu sculptures and Shiva sculptures were made. But with the influence of bhakti cult, the sculptures of Lord Ram and Lord Vishnu, and Lord Krishna, that also came into existence. ठीक है? फिर fifth point can be related to eclectic nature of society. Eclectic यानी कि diverse contradictory principles. Eclectic nature of society. Example, Kamakhya temple. Kamakhya temple of Assam, Guwahati. It is very, you will be very startled to know that mostly menstruating women are not allowed to enter in the sanctum sanctorum. Garbhagriha में menstruating women are not allowed to enter. But in Kamakhya Devi temple, menstruating goddess is basically worshipped. So that reflects the contradictory philosophies which were coexisting at the same time. ठीक है? Coexisting at the same time. So basically, we can say that it was these sculptures and their philosophy reflected diversity of opinion, thought, and philosophy and ideology. ये लिख सकते हैं, diversity of faith, belief, philosophy, ideology. ठीक है? Then इसको हटा देते हैं. Next can be Agma Shastras also propagated racism. How? Generally, you will find idols of the deities were made of white color in North India and black in South India. So kind of racial segregation was also existing that was reflected in these idols of the deities. Agma Shastra का नाम सुना होगा. Agma Shastras are basically the treaties or the rules, a codification of rules for making these Indian temples and the sculptures. So generally you will find North Indian temples made of white marble or white stone or white color. South Indians are generally made of black stones. So that reflects the division or bifurcation between Aryan and Dravidian race. ये भी लिखा जा सकता है. ये भी लिख सकते हैं. Then belief in various religious belief. These sculptures were a mechanism of expressing various religious beliefs also, a philosophy of a religion. For example, life after death. In some sculptures, you will find various gods, various deities are basically killing some demon. Gajasur Shiva करके एक मूर्ति का नाम है, वो लिख सकते हैं यहाँ पर. ठीक है. Then in Ellora, you can also write about Ravana shaking Mount Kailash. There is a very famous theme of Ravana shaking Mount Kailash. Then another can be equality of male and female also. In one way, on one side we saw that a patriarchy was promoted. On the other side, equality of male and female gods. Like there is a statue of Ardhanarishwar Shiva in Elephanta Caves. Elephanta Caves. ये भी लिख सकते हैं. Then we can write about, next point is Ardhanarishwar Shiva लिख लिया. Ardhanarishwar Shiva of Elephanta Caves. उसके अलावा और क्या लिख सकते हैं? Sculptures of female temple dancers. Female temple dancers कहाँ पर है ये? जगन्नाथ टेम्पल में है. That reflects that Devdasi practice or pratha was prevalent at that time. ये भी लिख सकते हैं. ठीक है. Then we can also write about worshipping of river goddesses. river goddesses and Yaksh and Yakshini, it means that society was generally, you know, they venerated nature. Nature was considered as very sacrosanct, it very sacred. That's why we were worshipping Yaksh and Yakshinis, who were the demigods, and we were also worshipping these river goddesses and the planets. So nature was venerated at that time. तो ये सारी चीजें लिख सकते हैं. And other than these sculptures reflect the craftsmanship and the fineness in the art of Indian art, ये भी लिख सकते हैं कि how a non-agricultural economy which was existing back then, some people were basically deployed in these sectors for and devoted to art and architectural activities. A non-farming activity was also, a non-farm job kind of occupational avenues were also available. ये भी लिखा जा सकता है. Then we can also write few other points. Normally, the images of ships on the walls of the temples, it depicts that India was having a prosperous trade with foreign countries. These things we can write, images of ships and all those things on various temples. ठीक है? तो इतना लिख दिया तो I think that will be sufficient for this question. And then how we are going to conclude? If we are to conclude this question, we can write that the Indian sculptures depicted a progressive, modernizing, often diverse, sometimes contradictory sculptures, which reflected the diversity of Indian philosophy and belief system. ठीक है? And it upholds the principle of Rigved. The Rigved में एक phrase है, ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. Truth is one, there are different ways of depicting it. Thus, Indian sculptures were basically an artistic expression of depicting various contradictory philosophy and belief system. ठीक है? ऐसा करके we can conclude. चलो. Next question. Why did the armies of British East India Company, ठीक है? Very unexpected question. ठीक है? Why the army? Generally, students, we as aspirant don't prepare for such questions. Anyways, not very tough. We can still write something. Why did the armies of British East India Company, mostly comprising of Indian soldiers, win consistently against the more numerous and better equipped armies of Indian rulers? Give reasons. ठीक है? तो क्या क्या रीजन थे? पहला तो ये है कि थोड़ा सा the premise on which this question is set is assertive basically. ठीक है? पहला तो ये कह रहा है कि why did the armies of British East India Company, mostly comprising of Indian soldiers, win consistently against the more numerous and better equipped armies of Indian rulers? Give reasons. So here we have to give reasons. We don't have to contradict this statement. It is simply given. We have to give the reason behind the victory of less outnumbered, the victory of outnumbered and ill-equipped East India Company soldiers. ठीक है? Against their counterparts, the army of princely states, basically. तो क्या क्या reason होंगे? First thing is, we have to understand first reason is when Britishers came into India, East India, as an East India Company, a trading company, so they started army as a career service. ठीक है? पहले क्या होता था कि these Indian rulers, they used to outsource their soldiers. ठीक है? जैसे this is the ruler and this ruler will divide his land among various feudal lords. ठीक है? And these feudal lords will be responsible for collection of taxes. Collection of tax. keep some part of the tax with himself and transfer remaining to the king. And this tax will be used for having, small battalion of army will be there. They can raise. And whenever there will be a need for the king, whenever king is going for war, these small local chieftains or these local lords, they will pool their army in the service of the king. So that was the practice which was going on. So, but there was a major weakness in such practice. Although there were some advantages, we will discuss some advantages, you can refer to books. Let's not go there. But the weakness of this system was that since various small troops of army were sourced from different sources, from different local lords, there were lack of coordination, cooperation, and they also lacked loyalty. Okay? They also lacked loyalty. तो आप देखोगे कि first thing, on the one side, British introduced army as career service, long-term employment. So career service, plus they started the practice of having standing army. So since it was a career service and it was a standing army, it means army was not sourced from different sources. So by outcome will be loyalty, better coordination, cooperation, more discipline, better training, etc., etc. On the other side, Indian rulers relied on mercenary army who were basically raised for a particular period. उसमें they were not trained. ठीक है, जिसको पैसा दिया तो they on the during peace time they were some agriculturist or maybe they may be trader or some other activity they were doing. But at the time of war, they were paid for a particular period of time. They, despite not having any training, they will just bear arm for the service of the king. They will get money, and in that return, they will fight for the king. So that was not a very effective way. So Britishers introduced this, that provided that strategic and tactical edge to Britishers. Okay. Second reason was the leadership. Leadership was also, if we take example of Lord Cornwallis, Robert Clive, they were very, very proficient leaders. They were great. They were great in warcraft. They were great in making strategy and everything. So second reason हो गया leadership. Second reason is leadership of British Army General. Then, and the reason is the war strategy which was followed by the Britishers. Okay? The war strategy which was followed by the Britishers, simply they introduce musket rifle. Musket rifle was introduced by the Britishers, and with the invention of rifle, or with the introduction of rifle in war, the importance of infantry increased, okay? And the importance of cavalry decreased. Cavalry tab important hai when war is fought with bows and arrows or with the swords. Rifle aa gaya, so infantry became more important. But Indian rulers continued to rely on cavalry, outdated methodology, but Britishers introduced these musket rifle, which actually improved the prospect of infantry in warfield. So that again provided that tactical advantage to the Britishers. ठीक है, तो introduction of musket rifle ये लिख सकते हैं. और क्या क्या होगा? One reason can be use of divide and rule or sabotage. 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 Britishers, in order to weaken their adversary, they used to bribe, they used to, weaken, incite defection in the rival group. For example, in Battle of Plassey, what happened? Mir Jafar, he conspired against Sirajuddaula, and because of this conspiracy, Sirajuddaula was defeated. Battle of Plassey. ठीक है, ये लिख सकते हैं. फिर long term planning. Britishers used long term planning before fighting any adversary. For example, subsidiary alliance or policy of ring and fence. These were the policies. These were basically long term. Even during the peace time, Britishers were preparing for the war. So ऐसा नहीं था. It was not a knee-jerk reaction कि today we are deciding yes, within 10 days we are going to wage a war against a particular king. Britishers used to, make a realistic assessment of the ground realities, and they used to hone their strategies accordingly. Okay? They used to hone their strategies accordingly. That's why these long-term plannings like subsidiary alliance, ring fence policy, these such type of policies were used by the Britishers, which actually paved the way for their victories. Okay? Then another reason was effective use of superior navy. Navy also provided a tactical edge to the Britishers. ये लिख सकते हैं, tactical edge. Then pragmatism against superstition. Britishers were more pragmatic. So in order to plan for a war, they relied on empirical evidences and practical knowledge rather than any kind of intuition or superstition. ठीक है? होता है ना जैसे ethics में पढ़ा होगा, merit or objectivity and subjectivity. On the other side, Indian rulers, they relied on Mahurat for waging war. Right time, Brahmins, the head priest used to advise king when to fight, when not to. Instead of king taking realistic assessment of his strengths and weaknesses, doing SWOT analysis, king was heavily relied on these soothsayers. ठीक है? So that also acted against the Indian rulers. That also went against the Indian rulers. For example, Battle of अगर आप पानीपत देखोगे, Third Battle of Panipat, one of the major reasons behind the defeat of the Marathas against the Afghans was also this superstitious belief. ठीक है? ये है. फिर एक और लिख सकते हैं. The invasion of Nadir Shah and Ahmad Shah Abdali. The invasion of Nadir Shah and Ahmad Shah Abdali, it actually exposed the weaknesses of Indian defense. ठीक है? Exposed the weakness in fighting. Like the Britishers were able to dissect what are the problems which has infested Indian defense. And by studying these, debacle of India against Nadir Shah and Ahmad Shah Abdali, they were able to comprehend and measure the power of Indian rulers, and they were able to plan their strategy. ये भी लिखा जा सकता है. Then we can write the Britishers' experience in various wars, like they fought international wars, 7 years war they fought against the French. So these international experiences also came very handy These first-hand experience of fighting international war in different territories, different location, uncharted territories on hostile territories, that also provided them the much needed experience. ठीक है, much needed experience. ठीक है, फिर एक तो ये लिख लिया, फिर दूसरा एक और लिख सकते हैं कि ब्रिटिशर्स नेवर वेंट फॉर ऑल आउट वॉर अगेंस्ट एनी ऑफ देयर एडवर्सरी. ठीक है, कभी भी अपना दे नेवर डिप्लॉयड देयर इंटायर रिसोर्स फॉर अ पर्टिकुलर बैटल. दैट्स वाई दे अडॉप्टेड द प्रैक्टिस ऑफ स्ट्रगल एंड ट्रूस. कि फर्स्ट दे विल फाइट, इफ दे फील दे आर लूजिंग देन दे विल साइन सम पीस ट्रीटी. Again they will regain their strength and will buy the time to fight again. ठीक है, जैसे when they were defeated in first Mysore war, they signed Treaty of Madras. When they are defeated initially, when they were defeated against Marathas, they signed the Treaty of Salbai. So they were always open. They were always open. They used diplomatic skills along with the war, along with their army, along with their army skills. ठीक है, तो अपनी fighting skills as well as diplomatic skills, they were able to effectively channelize all their resources, all their wisdom and intellectual ability for to their own advantage. ठीक है, फिर ये लिख सकते हैं. फिर उसके अलावा फिर वन मोर थिंग वी कैन डिस्कस इज कि there was lack of unity in India initially when British East India Company came into India. So they got the support of Indian intelligentsia. ठीक है, they thought that Britishers will have a modernizing impact on India. ठीक है, so that's why initially Indian elite class supported Britishers. ठीक है, because we were not able to assess the true nature of British Raj. So that was a division. There was not a united resistance against the Britishers during initial phase of their their reign in India. And that's why that provided Britishers the time to consolidate their power in India. ठीक है, ये लिख सकते हैं. Then one more point you can write. On one side, India was divided among various races, various castes and everything. On the other side, Britishers they shared homogeneity, linguistic, cultural, political homogeneity. ठीक है, फिर one more point we can write that East India Company was a private organization. So they had huge resources, huge money, deep pockets at their disposal. ठीक है, at their disposal. So that's why since it was a private company, they had no rules. ठीक है, सरकारी कोई कंपनी नहीं थी. They could use money to bribe any ruler. They used to give money in order to incite defection. So it was having a very flexible attitude without any ethical inflexibilities. So that private nature, that enterprising nature of East India Company and the huge money of huge resources enjoyed by the East India Company, that actually helped Britishers or the East India Company to spread its root into Indian subcontinent. ठीक है, तो these are the points which we can discuss in this question. Next question. Why was there a sudden spurt in famine in colonial India since the mid-18th century? Give reasons. Why पूछा, इसमें भी we don't have to discuss anything extra. We have to just support the statement. Why there was famine, sudden spurt in famine. So the trick of this question is we have to explain what were the reasons of famine during British rule. We have to give some account that famine existed even before the advent of Britishers in India. क्योंकि क्वेश्चन यही कह रहा है, सडन स्पर्ट. इट मीन्स ऐसा नहीं है कि ब्रिटिशर से पहले देयर वर नो फेमाइन्स इन इंडिया. There were famines in India, but when Britishers came into India, so this frequency of their occurrence increased. Okay? So why was there a sudden spurt in famines in colonial India since the mid 18th century? Mid 18th century, yani ki 1700 after 1750 we have to write. Okay? Give reasons. So how we are going to write it? Let's discuss the structure. Approach. First thing, we'll be discussing about what is famine. Then second, pre-British era, if you are able to recall, तो ये लिख सकते हैं pre-British era famines. Then reasons. Reasons. So what is famine? तो पहले definition क्या है? Lack of food for great number of people causing death due to starvation and illness. ठीक है? Famine का यही मतलब होता है. There is a difference between drought and famine. Drought can be natural, but famine are generally man-made. This question was asked in MGP also. Drought is natural, but famines are man-made. So famine can be generally, scarcity of food for large number of people, causing death due to starvation and illness. So ये हो गया definition of famine. Then famines can be, we can define, they can be man-made, they can be natural. Natural reasons for famine can be drought, or maybe spoiling of crop due to spread of some plant disease. Some plant disease. Yeah, inconsistent nature. Inconsistent nature. Inconsistent nature of Indian monsoon, which depends on many factors: Indian Ocean dipole movement, El Nino, La Nina, Madden-Julian oscillation. बहुत सारे ऐसे factors हैं, ठीक है? Madden-Julian oscillation. There are various factors which actually defines the monsoon and its quality. तो ये थोड़ा बहुत लिख लिया, ठीक है? फिर अब लिखेंगे कि भाई प्री ब्रिटिश एरा फेमाइंस इंडिया में कब हुई थी. सम वी हैव टू एन्यूमरेट सम एग्जांपल्स. तो पहली चीज ये कि इफ वी आर एबल टू रिकॉल इट, अगर नहीं भी है देन स्टिल वी कैन थिंक ऑफ समथिंग. पहला तो रीजन ये लिखेंगे, वन ऑफ द प्लॉजिबल रीजन फॉर द डिक्लाइन ऑफ इंडस वैली सिविलाइजेशन इज कंसिडर्ड एज फेमाइन. तो भाई इंडस वैली सिविलाइजेशन के समय में भी फेमाइन थी, वी कैन राइट. फेमाइन वॉज देयर एट दैट टाइम ऑल्सो. देन सेकेंड, इन कौटिल्याज अर्थशास्त्र, कौटिल्य अर्थशास्त्र में बात करते हैं ड्यूटी ऑफ अ किंग. ड्यूरिंग फेमाइन, in that time a state should act as welfare state. Welfare state. Then we can write about there were instances of famine during Mauryan rule also. Mauryan rule also. Instances of famine during Mughal rule. Mughal rule, especially during Jahangir and Aurangzeb. There were instances of famine during Jahangir and Aurangzeb. ठीक है? During Shah Jahan rule also, there was a famine in 1630. During Aurangzeb rule, there was famine in 1659 in Sindh province of India, undivided India. So So these are the some few examples we can quote. अगर नहीं याद आ रहा है, then we can write something like Kautilya Arthashastra में Kautilya has talked about the duties of the king. Then Aine Akbari में Abul Fazl has talked about instances of famine and what were the initiatives which were taken by Akbar during that period. So these are some stories we can write here. अब बात आती है कि why during British rule these instances of famine increased. Why? So before going discussing the factors, we have to write some major famines. ठीक है, तो पहला तो है कि भाई Great Bengal famine of 1770 we can write. Then we can write about the Chalisa famine of North Indian region of Delhi, Punjab, Haryana, 1793. Then we can discuss about the famous Bengal famine of 1943. ठीक है, तो ऐसे करके दो तीन अगर famines if you are able to recall, then we have to name such famines. Now we have to give reasons. So what were the reasons? तो पहला है reasons. The first reason is de-industrialization, de-urbanization, commercialization of agriculture. Then fourth reason is introduction of permanent settlement. Then some British policies of wealth, bureaucratic inertia. ठीक है, bureaucratic inertia. Then Western principles based upon social ये लिख सकते हैं. Diarchy in Bengal. Stringent taxation policy. Let's discuss them first, then we'll move forward. So de-industrialization. As we know that India was relegated to the position of the exporter of raw material, manufactured goods were imported into India. So due to de-industrialization, what happened? Many people lost their job. Many workers who were working in textile factories and other non-farm activities, they lost their job. So they migrated to rural areas. So the pressure on agriculture and the people dependent on agriculture increased. And when the pressure and the dependency on agriculture increased, so if there was any fluctuation in the productivity of due to any kind of adverse climatic condition, so many people used to starve and they used to die. ठीक है? तो ये हो गया. De-urbanization, again the same reason. When Indian industry collapsed, ठीक है, because of, ऐसा कहा जाता है ना कि industrial revolution in Britain led to de-industrialization of India. So when these factories were closed down, so people moved from urban areas to rural areas. So de-urbanization कह सकते हैं या ruralization. Ruralization. People migrated to rural areas. Again, the pressure on agriculture increased. So many people, became dependent, disguised unemployment. Commercialization. Instead of food, Indian farmers were forced to grow commercial crops like indigo, cotton, jute, rubber, sugarcane. ठीक है, sugarcane. अगर आपको देखो एग्जाम्पल, तो ड्यूरिंग द स्टार्ट ऑफ 20th century till 1945, within the period of 45 years, commercial crops, the production of commercial crops in India increased by 85%. तो just within the period of 45 years, मतलब कि 1885 से लेकर 1945 के बीच में, 1895 till 1945, in the span of 50 years, production of commercial crops jumped by 85%. And on the other side, food crops, subsistence crops, were able to increase their production just by 7%. So you can see the anomaly. And since more and more commercial crops were promoted over subsistence crops, so the overall food security of India was compromised. ठीक है, entire food security of India got compromised. फिर अगला है British policy, drain of wealth. British had no interest of welfare and giving relief to the people during the time of famine. They just wanted to extract as much as they could. Their policy acted like a sponge. They used to suck from India and squeeze in Britain. ठीक है, तो ये है. So drain of wealth, then bureaucratic inertia. Whenever there was an occurrence of some famine, instead of doing something effective on the ground, they were just discussing, passing laws, passing policies without doing anything. ठीक है, तो ये है. Then Western principle of social Darwinism, यानी कि survival of the fittest. सबको सबके हाल पे छोड़ दो, don't do anything. Those who will be strong, they will be able to survive. Those who are weak, they will perish. Survival of the fittest. Then Malthusian theory. Malthusian theory क्या है कि famines are generally natural phenomena. It is the nature's way of adjusting population. Malthus का सिद्धांत यही कहता है कि when the carrying capacity, when human population will increase beyond carrying capacity, nature will itself take some corrective measures in order to reduce the population. तो जैसे जब कोविड आया तो बहुत सारे लोग बोले कि माल्थस वाज राइट. ठीक है, इट्स बेसिकली अ नेचर्स प्लान टू रिड्यूस द बर्डन ऑन प्लैनेट अर्थ. एनीवेज, देन इंट्रोडक्शन ऑफ परमानेंट सेटलमेंट. इससे क्या आया? जमींदारी सिस्टम. Jamindari was basically a conditional ownership of land that was dependent upon how much tax or jamindar could collect on the behalf of Britishers and can transfer that tax to the Britishers. उसमें एक sunset clause भी होता था कि अगर इतना पैसा नहीं दिया इतने समय के बीच से पहले, so जमींदारी छिन सकती थी. So these jamindars, they became very exploitative क्योंकि उनको लगता था कि if they will not extract from their peasants, so their jamindari will come into danger. So irrespective of whether it is a good monsoon or bad monsoon, these jamindars, they practice very harsh tax collection mechanism in order to extract as much as possible, irrespective of any climatic or any kind of ground reality condition. तो ये जमींदारी सिस्टम आया जिसकी वजह से एब्सेंटी लैंडलॉर्डिज्म वाली चीज आई. These zamindars, they were not cultivating their land, rather land was cultivated by the tillers, by the tenants. So ये है. फिर Britishers, since they were imperialist power, they did not invest into Indian agriculture. They did not took efforts for irrigation, for fertilizer policy. They did not make any kind of fertilizer industry in India. They did not take any kind of initiative of introduction of any kind of scientific or other kind of technological intervention into the field of agriculture in order to increase their productivity. So such type of needed initiative which should have been used by the Britishers in India, they did not do it. Their major focus was just to extract rent from India as much as they could. ठीक है, तो ये वाली चीज लिख सकते हैं यहाँ पर. फिर ब्रिटिश एजुकेशन पॉलिसी भी लिख सकते हैं कि वन ऑफ द मेजर प्रॉब्लम विथ दीज फेमाइंस एंड रिलेटेड डेथ वो कैन ऑल्सो बी एट्रीब्यूटेड टू द ब्रिटिश पॉलिसी, एजुकेशनल पॉलिसी. वाई सो? इसमें एक लिख सकते हैं कि सिंस ब्रिटिशर्स प्रमोटेड जस्ट द लिटरेचर in the name of Western education, they just promoted Western literature and philosophy, but not Western science and technology. So if they would have promoted Western science and technology as well as the medical science and other, engineering in India, so that would have, produced doctors, medical practitioners, engineers in India. So they could have taken some initiative in order to fight against such occurrence of famines in India. They could have taken care of, plant diseases which used to infest crops. They would have taken care of any person who is dying because of hunger. So such kind of intervention they could have made some positive contribution. Some engineers would have done something in the field in order to, dam and construction of dams, canal or irrigation projects in India. So such type of, since the British policy of education was flawed with a malign intention, they did not promote science and technology and other kind of, scientific and technical education in India. That also created problems. Okay, because we Indians were not able to tackle these challenges. फिर 1943 का Bengal famine was created. It was a man-made famine. It was created because most of the agriculture produce was exported to the war front for the soldiers. ठीक है. फिर म्यांमार से we closed down our borders with Myanmar because there was an apprehension of Japanese conquest into India. इसलिए जापान का बॉर्डर हमने बंद कर दिया. हमने बंगाल से सारा जितना भी अनाज था, we exported all the grains to the war front. ठीक है. फिर उसमें विंस्टन चर्चिल, द रोल ऑफ विंस्टन चर्चिल कैन नॉट बी इग्नोर्ड. ही सेड दैट लेट देम डाई. These Indians breed like rats. That was the actual statement which was stated by Winston Churchill. So that callous attitude of Britishers against India, that also contributed to the Great Bengal Famine of 1943. So these were the reasons. British policies and all these things, mostly the British policy and their callous and indifferent attitude towards India contributed hugely for frequent recurrence of these famines in India. ठीक है, चल. So in conclusion में क्या लिखेंगे? Conclusion में लिखेंगे कि वही one line, drought is can be natural, but famines were basically man-made. And in the context of India, it is rightly proven that the callous, indifferent, callous attitude of Britishers, malgovernance, malfeasance, bureaucratic inertia, lack of political zeal, or just because of sheer negligence, these famines used to recur in India. ठीक है, तो mostly it was a man-made crisis. तो यहाँ से जाके हम उसको कर सकते हैं. फिर फुल स्टॉप करके आफ्टर इंडिपेंडेंस ग्रीन रेवोल्यूशन हुआ, एंड आफ्टर ग्रीन रेवोल्यूशन इंडिया वाज एबल टू able to achieve food security, land consolidation, digitization, green revolution, opening of fertilizer industry, various irrigation projects, multi-purpose projects like Satluj, Bhakra Nangal Dam, ये सब कुछ करके example करके we were able to ward off the evil of occurrence of famine in India. So ऐसा करके we can conclude. ठीक है. डिस्कस द मेन कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन ऑफ गुप्ता पीरियड एंड चोला पीरियड टू इंडियन हेरिटेज एंड कल्चर। ठीक है, अब इसमें दिया है डिस्कस। इट मीन्स वी हैव टू गिव सम पॉजिटिव एज वेल एज नेगेटिव कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन ऑफ गुप्ता पीरियड एंड द चोला पीरियड। ठीक है, गुप्ता पीरियड एंड चोला पीरियड। अब इसमें चोला दिया है वर्ड, लेकिन अब ये इंपीरियल चोलास के बारे में बात कर रहा है, और दे आर टॉकिंग अबाउट द चोलास ऑफ संगम एरा, बट वी विल जनरली डील दिस क्वेश्चन उसी तरीके से। इंपीरियल चोलास, संगम चोलास अलग थे, दे were existing during the period of 300 BC till 300 AD. Imperial Cholas came into existence around 900 century onwards. ठीक है, एंड ऐसा कुछ इंट्रोडक्शन देंगे। सबसे पहले गुप्ता पीरियड, we will write some introduction of Gupta period, then Chola period. ठीक है, गुप्ता पीरियड एंड चोला पीरियड। गुप्ता पीरियड एंड चोला पीरियड, तो 4th सेंचुरी से लगभग 6th सेंचुरी तक ये लिख सकते हैं। देन चोला पीरियड वी कैन राइट अबाउट 9th सेंचुरी टिल 13th सेंचुरी। ठीक है, वी कैन ऑल्सो choose to draw a map. Cholas ruled here, Guptas generally ruled here. ठीक है, we can draw the map also. Although Chola Empire was spread to Southeast Asia also, Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, ठीक है, they defeated Sri Vijaya dynasty of Thailand वाला जो peninsula है। Anyways, let's discuss about the contribution of Guptas. ठीक है, चलो let's discuss one by one. The first contribution, इंट्रोडक्शन ऑफ फ्री स्टैंडिंग टेम्पल्स। ठीक है, इससे पहले टेम्पल्स वेर जनरली रॉक कट, बट गुप्ताज वेर द फर्स्ट रूलर्स हु इंट्रोड्यूस फ्री स्टैंडिंग टेम्पल्स। इट मीन्स टेम्पल्स विल बी कंस्ट्रक्टेड आउट ऑफ स्टोन्स और आउट ऑफ ब्रिक्स। उससे पहले क्या होता था कि मेजर कोई बड़ा सा पहाड़ है, उसको काट के उसमें रॉक कट टेम्पल बना देना। ठीक है, दैट वाज द प्रैक्टिस। But these Guptas introduced the practice of freestanding temples. For example, the Shautar temple, Iran temple, these are some examples. ठीक है, first thing. Second is revival of Sanskrit during this period. Sanskrit was made as the court language of the Guptas, so Sanskrit was revived. Third is revival of Hinduism. उससे पहले अगर आप देखोगे कि Mauryan, especially Mauryan, Kushans, they were patrons of Buddhism. Kharvela was the patron, King Kharvela was the patron of Jainism. But when Gupta rulers came into existence, so they adopted Hinduism, they revived Hinduism. So ये contribution हो गया, revival of Hinduism. Then another contribution was codification of law. Laws before Guptas were not codified. It was ambiguous, and it was on the mercy of the king how he is deciding on a particular matter. But during the Gupta age, these dharma shastras were written, laws and rules were codified. ठीक है, these laws and rules were codified during Gupta period. That led to rule of law in the country. ठीक है, rule of law in the country. फिर उसके बाद गुप्ताज के बारे में और लिख सकते हैं, दे अडॉप्टेड द प्रैक्टिस ऑफ एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन। ठीक है, तो दैट इज वन ऑफ द कंट्रीब्यूशन टू इंडियन हेरिटेज एंड कल्चर। फिर देन वेरियस राइटर्स लाइक कालिदास है, फिर शूद्रक, वात्स्यायन, विष्णु शर्मा, विशाखा दत्त, ये जितने भी इंपॉर्टेंट राइटर्स हैं, पोएट्स, राइटर्स, कालिदास हो गया, देन शूद्र का ही रोट में चटकाटिका, विष्णु शर्मा रोट पंचतंत्र। ठीक है, देन वात्स्यायन रोट कामसूत्र। तो ये सारी चीजें लिख सकते हैं ड्यूरिंग दिस पीरियड। देन साइंटिफिक अचीवमेंट में भी लिख सकते हैं, इंडियन हेरिटेज और कल्चर साइंटिफिक अचीवमेंट में आर्यभट्ट के बारे में वी कैन राइट। ठीक है. Brahmagupta, Aryabhat discovered the value of pi, then the phenomena of occurrence of a solar and lunar eclipse, distance between earth and sun. ठीक है. ये सारी चीजें, वैल्यू ऑफ जीरो, पाई, ये ऑल दिस थिंग्स. देन ब्रह्मगुप्ता, he uh, he was a mathematician. साइक्लिक क्वाड्रिलेटरल का एरिया वो कैसे, हाउ टू कैलकुलेट द साइक्लिक क्वाड्रिलेटरल एरिया ऑफ अ साइक्लिक क्वाड्रिलेटरल, दैट वाज फर्स्ट डिस्कवर्ड बाय ब्रह्मगुप्ता. फिर आइडल वर्शिप गॉट प्रमोटेड ड्यूरिंग गुप्ता पीरियड. ठीक है. वॉट एवर स्टैचूज विच वी आर सीइंग टुडे, कि लॉर्ड विष्णु ऐसे हैं, शिव ऐसे हैं, त्रिशूल होगा, देन दुर्गा विल बी, द लायन विल बी द कैरियर ऑफ दुर्गा, दुर्गा विल बी हैविंग द 10 hands. ऑल दीज imagination of artist imagine these gods and goddesses first time during the Gupta period. ठीक है. Gupta period. Then we can also write about the Sarnath Buddha that was inspired by the Gupta art. It is an example of Gupta art, Sarnath Buddha. ठीक है. सारनाथ बुद्धा. फिर उसके बाद जो है we will discuss about the Chola period. ठीक है. तो first we will discuss about the Chola temple architecture. Chola temple architecture, the Dravidian temple architecture, then its features like huge gopuram, tall towers, tall shikharas, tall vimanas. ठीक है. Gopurams, effective use of sculptures, numerous sculptures on the walls of the temple. Then temple towns, creation of temple towns. ठीक है. Some examples of Chola temples like Brihadeshwara temple we can write. Use of monolithic kalash, monolithic shikhar over Brihadeshwara temple, temple towns, temple ponds, use of various iconography, mural paintings on the walls of Chola temples. तो ये हो गया contribution Cholas का इसमें. फिर Chola bronze statue and Nataraja Shiva लिख सकते हैं. Chola bronze statue and Nataraja Shiva we can write here. Then we can write about the Shaivism. During Chola period, worship of Shiva, the practice of worship of Shiva gained traction because they were the worshipper, Cholas were the worshipper of Shiva. Under the influence of Nayanar saints, they adopted Shaivism. ठीक है? They adopted Shaivism. So they promoted the worship of Shiva. Various Shaivite sects like Kapalik, Kalmukhas, these sects of Shaivism were born during Chola period. Kamban Ramayana was written during Chola period. ये भी लिख सकते हैं. Kamban Ramayana was written during Chola period. ठीक है. अब हेरिटेज में एक और चीज है. They were the pioneers of local self government in India. जो पंचायती राज इंस्टीट्यूशन है, that was first conceptualized during Chola rule. That is called Kudu-Volai system. ठीक है. थोड़ा सा पढ़ना कभी Chola local self government, very important topic. Chola local self government. They introduced the Kudu-Volai system, how village assemblies, जिसको उर बोलते थे, villages were divided into two groups. One was Valangai village and second one was Agrahara or Brahmadev village. दो तरीके के गांव होते थे basically. Brahmadev village वो थे, they were tax-free lands which were donated to the priest. ठीक है. और Valangai, और they were tax-free. उसके साइड में एक नॉर्मल विलेजेस होते थे, they were called Valangai villages. They had to pay taxes. तो उसमें एक में सभा होती थी, एक में उर होता था. कंप्लीट है, यू कैन रीड बाय योरसेल्फ उसमें और डिटेल में. So that was also one of the contribution of Cholas. Then Chola took the Indian culture abroad through their conquest. उनको imperial Cholas ही इसीलिए कहा जाता था because they had this imperialistic tendency. They defeated Sri Lanka, they defeated Maldives, they defeated Southeast Asian countries, especially Sri Vijaya Kingdom करके जो मलय पेनिनसुला है वहां पे एक श्रीविजया किंगडम थी, दैट वाज डिफीटेड बाय द चोलास, एंड विद देयर कॉन्क्वेस्ट चोलास कैरिड इंडियन कल्चरल फीचर्स टू साउथ ईस्ट एशिया, कंबोडिया, लाओस, थाईलैंड, इंडोनेशिया। ठीक है, ये सारी चीजें लिख सकते हैं। अब नेगेटिव इंपैक्ट क्या होगा? व्हाट वर द नेगेटिव कंट्रीब्यूशन ऑफ गुप्ता पीरियड एंड चोला पीरियड ऑन इंडियन हेरिटेज एंड कल्चर? तो गुप्ताज, फर्स्ट वी विल डिस्कस अबाउट द गुप्ताज। तो अनटचेबिलिटी, द चांडाल कम्युनिटी, द बर्थ ऑफ चांडाल्स, दे वे फर्स्ट came into existence during the Guptas, चांडाल कम्युनिटी। एंडोगैमी, यानी कि एक कास्ट में ही शादी होगी, that was first, that became more prevalent, institutionalized and fossilized during Guptas. Feudal system, actually the practice of land donation was started by the Satavahanas, कि ब्राह्मणों को लैंड डोनेट किया जाएगा, टैक्स फ्री लैंड विल बी डोनेटेड टू द ब्राह्मण्स। दैट प्रैक्टिस वाज स्टार्टेड बाय द सतवाहनास, बट it was further promoted by the Guptas and as well as the Cholas also. So that created feudal system. These Brahmins became the feudal lords क्योंकि उनको कुछ जमीन दे दी जाती थी, and they were not paying taxes also. So that created a feudal order in the society, and also impoverishment and exploitation of peasantry. क्योंकि these feudal lords, these Brahmins started exploiting the people, these farmers. So that led to impoverishment and exploitation of peasantry. ठीक है। फिर during Gupta period, the influence of Brahmin element into society increased. So Brahmanization, there was an increasing Brahmanization of society. So if I'm saying that there was an increasing Brahmanization of society, it means all the ill factors like caste system, sati pratha, devdasi pratha, untouchability, superstition, ritual, increasing ritual practices in the religion increased during Gupta period. ठीक है, ritualism. Slavery became institutionalized during the Guptas. Then during Guptas, detribalization of society happened because tribals were forced to adopt mainstream culture. So it means that led to detribalization of society. ठीक है? The practice of forced labor called Vishti, VISHTI, that also became more prevalent during Guptas. So ये सारे points we can discuss here. Then Cholas के बारे में, again Chola carried forward the practice of land grants to the Brahmins that created a feudal order in the society leading to exploitation of peasantry. Sati Pratha, Devdasi Pratha, ठीक है? Sati Pratha and Devdasi Pratha came into existence during the Cholas. So there was some negative, legacy, negative impact of the Cholas and the Guptas over Indian heritage and culture. ठीक है? Indian heritage and culture. Anyways, next question is, discuss the significance of lion and bull figures in Indian mythology, art and architecture. Significance of lion and bull on mythology, art and architecture. 250 words में 15 mark का question. So lion. What does lion signify? There is some symbolic meaning of lion and bull. Lion depicts royalty, courage, bravery, aristocracy, ठीक है, dharma. Bull is a symbol of strength, devotion, masculinity, strength, devotion, masculinity. ठीक है. Sensuality also. ठीक है, sensuality also. It is also it is also considered as a symbol of prosperity. ठीक है, and good luck. तो these are the symbolic meaning of lion and bull. अब बात आती है impact about their mythology. mythology में इनका क्या रोल है? तो आसान है. लायन नरसिम्ह अवतार. ठीक है. अगेन लायन इज कंसिडर्ड एज कैरियर ऑफ दुर्गा. ठीक है, ये हो गया. बुल सिंपल, नंदी बुल who is a carrier of Lord Shiva. कैरियर ऑफ लॉर्ड शिवा, ये लिख सकते हैं. ये होगी मैथोलॉजी. मैथोलॉजी मतलब कि जो स्टोरीज हैं बेसिकली अदर देन हिस्ट्री इज कॉल्ड मैथोलॉजी. अब लेट्स डिस्कस अबाउट देयर सिग्निफिकेंस ऑन आर्ट एंड आर्किटेक्चर. तो लायन का सिग्निफिकेंस on art and architecture. तो पहले the first thing is very simple. Modern pillars of Sarnath, Kishangarh. ठीक है, लाइन का ये हो गया. देन सेकंड इज महावीर, लॉर्ड महावीर who was the 24th Tirthankar, Jain Tirthankar, is depicted with the symbol of lion in Jain religion. ठीक है, in Jain religion. बात करते हैं बुल की. रामपुरवा बुल. ठीक है, ये भी एक अशोकन पिलर है. रामपुरवा बुल. the capital is basically at right time, at present time it is located in राष्ट्रपति भवन. रामपुरवा बुल के बारे में बात कर सकते हैं. then और क्या बात कर सकते हैं? डिपिक्शन ऑफ नंदी बुल, मोनोलिथिक नंदी ऑफ विजयनगर टेम्पल आर्किटेक्चर. ठीक है, विजयनगर टेम्पल आर्किटेक्चर, ये बात कर सकते हैं. फिर हरप्पन सील्स में हरप्पा के बारे में बात कर सकते हैं. हरप्पन सील्स में वी कैन फाइंड बुल. In prehistoric cave paintings also we can see the depiction of bull, kind of animal which is depicted in prehistoric cave paintings from Bhimbetka and Lakhudiyar. ये भी लिखा जा सकता है. Then we can write about ऋषभ देव जो थे. ठीक है, Lord Mahavir was the symbol of Lord Mahavir was lion, and the first Tirthankar of Jainism, of Jain religion, Rishabh Dev, who is also called Adinath, he was depicted with the symbol of bull. ठीक है. Then Indian horoscope Bull is depicted with taurians, ठीक है, Taurus, bull. तो इसी तरीके से लिखना है, तो फिर ज़्यादा कुछ इसमें है नहीं. फिर वी कैन राइट अबाउट द बुल एंड द लायन. एक और चीज़ लिख सकते हैं, इन शिवा स्टैचू, इन शिवा टेम्पल, on one side we will find a Nandi bull and also the Durga who will be there with a lion. So that depicts coexistence of different ideology together. एक तरफ prey है, एक तरफ predator है. ठीक है, एक तरफ prey है, prey is the bull who is a herbivorous, and a lion who is basically a carnivorous, and they have mutually opposite nature. So two animals of mutually opposing nature coexisting depicted simultaneously, it means it depicts coexistence of harmony, mutual acceptance, tolerance in the society. ठीक है, तो ऐसा भी लिखा जा सकता है. चलो, and we can write these animals of lion, bull, and bull are the common common element in in all the all the religions of India, especially Buddhism also, Buddhism, Jainism, and Hinduism. In Buddhism, lions are generally considered as the carrier of dharma. They are used to spread dharma in all the directions. Jainism mein Lord Mahavir is symbolized with lion. Then lion is considered, all these things we can write here in the conclusion. ठीक है? Lion and bull symbols. Next question. A political and administrative reorganization of states and territories has been a continuous ongoing process since the mid-18th century. Discuss with examples. ठीक है, डिस्कस विथ एग्जाम्पल्स. अब इसको डिस्कस करना है. पॉलिटिकल एंड एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव रीऑर्गेनाइजेशन. तो सबसे पहले क्या लिखेंगे? देखो, रीऑर्गेनाइजेशन दो तरीके से होगा. प्री इंडिपेंडेंस, फर्स्ट थिंग. Administrative reorganization, political reorganization. See, there's a difference between political reorganization and administrative reorganization. Political reorganization means when new states are created. In 2014, a question was asked. ठीक है, in mains. Political reorganization means when new states are created. Power is basically altered. ठीक है? So when new states are created, it means political reorganization. When new districts are created, new blocks are created, new taluka or some, मतलब ये सारा कुछ, if commissionerate is created and districts are created, it means it is an administrative reorganization mostly. ठीक है? तो difference होता है administrative and political reorganization में. Creation of states are basically both political as well as administrative reorganization, but creation of districts are just administrative reorganization, not political reorganization, because political power continue to remain centralized. It's just for the sake of administrative convenience, some new districts are created, some new blocks are created. ठीक है? तो ये याद रखेंगे. Anyways, political and administrative reorganization of states and territories has been a continuous ongoing process since the mid-19th century. Discuss with examples. अब क्या क्या examples हैं? तो इसको दो पार्ट में विल डिवाइड इट इन टू पार्ट्स, प्री इंडिपेंडेंस एंड पोस्ट इंडिपेंडेंस. ठीक है, प्री इंडिपेंडेंस, पोस्ट इंडिपेंडेंस लिखेंगे. तो प्री इंडिपेंडेंस में कब कब रीऑर्गेनाइजेशन हुआ? आफ्टर 1857 रीऑर्गेनाइजेशन हुआ. देन गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया एक्ट 1861. ठीक है, व्हाट हैपेंड इन 1861? ठीक है, वो भी डिस्कस करेंगे. दीज आर द थिंग्स विच वी आर गोइंग टू डिस्कस. सो फर्स्ट थिंग, after 1857, Bengal, Madras and Bombay, ठीक है, these provinces were created and allocated with some power. ठीक है, अगर आप देखोगे फिर ड्यूरिंग चार्टर एक्ट ऑफ 1833 Bombay and Madras were divested from their legislative power, and all the legislative powers were centralized into the hands of Governor of Bengal. 1833 Charter Act. तो 1833 का लिखेंगे एग्जाम्पल. Then in 1861 process of decentralization happened. And this decision of divesting the legislative powers of Madras and Bombay was restored. ठीक है, 1861. तो एक हो गया 1833, then 1861. ठीक है. Then during 1870 Mayo resolution का एग्जाम्पल लिख सकते हैं. Mayo resolution, through this resolution local self-government was created, and the state provincial governments were allocated with responsibility of running these local self-government bodies. ठीक है, समझो इसको. Let's discuss it. 1833. अभी हम लोग we are discussing about pre-independence. 1833 Charter Act. Bombay and Madras, they were not given the power. Legislative power was with Bengal. And thus, Governor of Bengal became Governor General of India. Then second, 1861. Power of legislation of Bombay and Madras was restored. ठीक है, Bombay and Madras was restored. Then third, Mayo resolution of creation of local self-government. Then fourth, Ripon resolution. देखो दोनों पूछा है, पॉलिटिकल एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन की बात नहीं कही है, एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव रिऑर्गेनाइजेशन की बात कही है. तो मेयो रेजोल्यूशन ने भी इट टॉक्स अबाउट लोकल सेल्फ गवर्नमेंट. रिपन रेजोल्यूशन इट आल्सो टॉक्ड अबाउट लोकल सेल्फ गवर्नमेंट. Ripon resolution is considered as the Magna Carta of local self-government, and that's why Lord Ripon is considered as the father of local self-government in India. ठीक है. Then Royal Commission of Decentralization. ये भी लिख सकते हैं, Royal Commission of Decentralization. Then sixth, Partition of Bengal. Partition of Bengal. इसके बारे में लिखा जा सकता है. So these were some administrative and political reorganization before Britishers. अब after British या post independence क्या क्या हुआ? धार कमेटी बनी. We can name धार कमेटी. फिर धार कमेटी के बाद JVP बनी. फिर उसके बाद फजल अली बनी. Then second, State Reorganization Act was passed in 1956. ठीक है, उससे पहले आंध्र प्रदेश was created in 1953. पोटी श्री रामुलू का नाम सुना ही होगा. Might have heard about पोटी श्री रामुलू. ठीक है, 1953 आंध्र प्रदेश was created. Then State Reorganization Act 1956. State Reorganization Act 14 states were created. ठीक है, 14 states and 6 union territories were created. State Reorganization Act of 1956. फिर उसके बाद पंजाब से अलग हुआ हरियाणा. फिर गुजरात. Maharashtra and Gujarat were created. ठीक है. Then Assam Assam से 7 states were created out of Assam. 7 states were created out of Assam. ठीक है. Then Delhi, initially after independence, Delhi was given it was declared as state. But later, it became Union Territory. When it became Union Territory? In 1956 State Reorganization Act. Again, it was given a partial statehood by 69th Constitutional Amendment Act, if I'm not wrong with the number of the act. ठीक है. 69th, yes. In 1991, 69th Constitutional Amendment Act, GNCT Act was passed and partial statehood was given to Delhi. ये लिख सकते हैं. Then फिर क्या हुआ और क्या क्या है? Yes, in 2001, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh and Uttarakhand or Uttaranchal was created. Then in 2014, Telangana was created. We can also mention what were the grounds for these divisions. ठीक है? Telangana was created. Then 2019, Jammu and Kashmir. ठीक है? 2019 Jammu and Kashmir was divided. ठीक है? into two union territories. ठीक है? Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, 2 union territories, were created in 2019. So we have discussed all these political as well as administrative divisions. ठीक है? हाँ, एक और चीज है कि if union territory is created basically, so it is again an administrative division, not a political reorganization. So anyway, so Jammu and Kashmir, who was a full state, was converted into union territory of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. 2 union territories were created in 2019. तो ये लिख दिया हमने post independence. अब बात आती है conclusion की. तो in conclusion we will talk about nation making is a work in progress. Work in progress. ठीक है? WIP, work in progress. And as the nation progresses, as the society develops, the aspiration of society also increases. And taking cognizance of this factor, India was made an indestructible union of destructible states, because the drafters of our constitution had that vision that this reorganization of states will continue to rise in coming time. ठीक है? And that's why flexibility in creation of these states, a much needed flexibility in the constitution was provided, taking cognizance of this factor, the diversity and all these variation in Indian cultural and social milieu. And at present also, there are so many demands. There are demands of each and every corner of the country for creation of separate state, like Vidarbha out of Maharashtra, Saurashtra out of Gujarat, Harit Pradesh, basically Western Uttar Pradesh, Bundelkhand and Baghelkhand, as well as Purvanchal out of Uttar Pradesh, Gorkha land, Nagalism, Greater Nagalism out of Nagaland and some adjacent areas. ठीक है? So there are so many demands which are already there. ठीक है? Which are already there, where people are demanding for separate state. तो ऐसा कुछ करके लिखेंगे कि भाई creation of these states are basically work in progress, and there will and taking cognizance of this factor, or forefathers envisioned it, and that's why the flexibility in the constitution was provided. And recent examples of demand for these separate states are are the examples of this increasing aspiration of Indian society. However, states should not be created on a very parochial interest. Rather, the national interest should be kept paramount. Administrative convenience, geographical proximity, administrative convenience, economic viability, as well as unity and integrity of the country should be given prominence over parochial, narrow and sectarian interests. So ऐसा करके we can write our conclusion. So that was the first portion of our discussion. ठीक है, तो चलो, तो remaining portion will be discussed by some other faculty. She will be discussing about the social the topics related to social issues and geography after a very short break. So don't go anywhere. We'll take a short break of 5 minutes, and after that we will resume our discussion with respect to social issues and geography. Thank you.
So let us discuss the geography and society paper from GS1, all right, these portions. The way that we're going to manage this is we'll talk about the geography questions first and the society questions afterwards. A general disclosure, right, in the beginning, a general disclaimer in the beginning. I'm going to tell you a lot of arguments, a lot of points. So if I am giving you, say, 6 different points, right? So everybody who has written the exam yesterday, right? Everybody who has written the exam this year, you have to be very, very conscious of the fact that we are giving you as many points as possible. You were not required to come up with everything in the exam. Don't judge yourself that harshly, right? In hindsight, it's always easier to remember these arguments, but in the exam, it will always be a lot more challenging, right? So the purpose of the discussion, the purpose of us giving you all of these arguments, all of these points, all of these possibilities is that you should have the ability to cross-check that what I've written, does it match or not? Right? It does not again mean that you have to write everything that I'm going to tell you. All right? What I will teach you, what I will be talking about is how could you have thought about the answer? How could we have arrived at this answer? And there are 2 different patterns to this, right? One pattern is going to be that you knew the answer, as in the question was an expected one. That means you will get above average marks in that question, right? This is case scenario 1. The second case is going to be that you did not know the answer, right? And you will write an average answer there, right? So how to come up with an average answer when you were not aware of the answer is also a skill, isn't it? So that's why we will discuss the methodology and the thought process behind each of these questions. All right. Now, let's begin. The first question in our series was question 4, and it said, describe the characteristics and types of primary rocks, right? So what did you need to know? You needed to know, okay, primary rocks, right? Now, this is testament to the fact, this is proof that simply by reading your basic NCERT carefully, right, going word by word, reading your NCERTs carefully will help you directly in the mains examination. The only jump you had to make was that primary rocks means igneous rocks, right? And as soon as you know igneous rocks, then of course you can give me characteristics, you can give me types, you can give me diagrams, all sorts of things, right? So for the introduction for this answer, you could tell me that, okay, primary rocks are the rocks that are formed out of magma and lava, right, from the interior of the earth. Fair enough. Very simple, classic introduction. Again, for geography, you begin simply. It is a completely, perfectly acceptable way of doing these things, isn't it? So, okay, what are igneous rocks? This is going to be the introduction here. I for question 4 is what? Define primary rocks, right? First paragraph that you were required to make was what? The characteristics of primary rocks, right? Now, What are the characteristics of primary rocks that we can identify? They are crystalline in nature. They will not have any fossils, right? Because it's made out of molten rock, so naturally any organic material will burn off, isn't it? It will be granular. It has grains, it has crystals, right? It can be fine-grained, large grained, depending upon the temperature differences. Fair enough. Then it has low reactivity to acids, right? You could have written they could be acidic, basaltic in nature. You could tell me that they have hardness, right? You can tell me about volcanic glass. Anything that you remember about the characteristics of igneous rocks. You give me 3 or 4 and I would be satisfied. Give me 3, 4 characteristics and the examiner is happy. And it's the only thing that is required for you to do is to just make that mental jump, right? So you tell me, okay, that they are crystalline, right? They are non-fossiliferous, they don't have fossils, right? They are hard, unreactive to acids, this sort of thing you write and you're done. For 10 marker, just this much nomenclature is sufficient, right? Then the second paragraph is supposed to be the types, right? Now, some topics are the topics that students will prepare in a lot more detail, right? You're going to prepare a lot about the volcanism, right? From there, you have to remember that, okay, types are what? Intrusive and extrusive, right? You could remember this from there. Any rock that is formed, any igneous rock that is formed beneath the surface, intrusive, right? When it comes out of the surface, extrusive. You can remember examples also. You can remember these formations also. That sort of thing you can pick up, and of course you can give me value additions here. Another way of defining types would be what? Acidic and basaltic. Right? This you could remember from the plate tectonics theory, from your this thing, jigsaw fit and all of those, geomorphology, the initial parts, right? That there can be acidic lava, there can be basaltic lava. Acidic is more dense, basaltic forms shields, that sort of thing, right? From there you could give me another difference in subtypes. Now, if a student gives me just one type of differentiation classification, acceptable. Somebody who gives me the other type, acceptable. Someone who gives me both will get above average marks, right? So here we have to identify the distinction between writing an average answer and an above average answer. The average answer, which will get you out of 10 marks in the range of 3.5 to 4.5, right? And above average is naturally in the range of what? 5, 5.5 to 6, right? So just that 1 mark for the depth of analysis that you're going to give me. Now, what could be the value additions in this particular question? The value additions which were possible, and if you could have thought them up, then of course it would be a good idea to make it. Somebody would have made a diagram of the rock cycle, right? That okay? You could have made the diagram of the rock cycle, igneous, sedimentary, metamorphic, and igneous is the primary rock. Fair enough. You could give me strong examples of different types of rocks. You could give me pumice, you could give me this thing, basalt, you can give me granite, you can give me dolomite, that sort of thing, right? The idea is that if you remember the name of the rocks, it would be a good idea to pepper that information over this answer. Fair enough. So what do you write in conclusion? The conclusion can be that, okay, rocks have direct significance on the life and livelihood of people around it. It has cultural impact, it has environmental impact. That's why it's necessary for us to study. Simple and clear, right? What other things could you have written? Somebody could have mentioned black soil, right? Black soil, cotton, regure, all of that here. That okay, igneous rock in India, right, led to the formation of black soil. That's why cotton in India. Fair enough. So that's how you would handle question number 4 for geography. Done. Now, the next question in this series for us was question 5. And this question was about cyclones. The question was, discuss the meaning of color-coded weather warnings for cyclone-prone areas given by the Indian Meteorological Department. All right. So they're saying that, okay, the Met Department issues colored coded warnings. You have to discuss the meaning. Fair enough. Now, what is the introduction? For the introduction, you can describe the IMD, right? It is the premier department of what? Weather related events in the country. It is the department, it is the organization, it is the body that will what? That will issue the warnings, the advisories for any harsh climatic event, right? That sort of thing you could have written. Any sort of description of IMD works for me. You want to give me a description of cyclone, that also works for me. So, or maybe you describe a cyclone and its impacts. That is also acceptable, perfectly fine, right? Now, as soon as you give me the introduction, I want you to move on to the body of the answer. What is the body of the answer? IMD's color-coded scheme. Right, give me the heading, put it in a box and move on. What is the color-coded scheme? That you have 4 different warnings: red, orange, yellow, and green. Right, now you can begin from either side. I don't have an issue. If you begin from red, orange, yellow, green, that also works. You begin from green, yellow, orange, red, it works from us, right? The only thing is that the warnings have to be correct, right? So what can the introduction be for this part? That okay, it is a graded approach. Green means that there is no adversity, there is no warning that has been issued, there is no advisory that has been issued, everything is normal, there is no likelihood of adverse weather. That is the green cyclone warning. Then yellow, that okay, there can be some anticipation, right? You have to be aware. Just as with traffic lights, you have to be aware that okay, there is a likelihood of bad weather to come in the near future, right? Then orange means that the authorities and the citizens have to be prepared for bad weather that is incoming, right? It gives you the warning of the different things that could be expected. You can expect what? Electricity shutdown, you can expect transport disruption, that sort of thing. So you give me this level of explanation here, articulation here. Yellow also means that authorities need to plan for evacuation and emergency processes, right? And red, of course, means that this is the highest alert that can be issued. It means you have to take action. The authorities and the citizens both have to take actions. And that means that bad weather is now guaranteed. It is now underway and it is disrupting the normal life, isn't it? So the way that you're going to describe these things is in a graded way, either one direction or the other, right? Fair enough. This is all you had to give me in this particular answer. It was a very simple, direct answer, but still very factual in nature. If you knew, you knew. There is no invention of the answer that is possible. There is no, memorization or, deduction that is possible for this answer. No, you have to know red, orange, yellow, green. And again, this system of nomenclature, it's common to all of the adverse weather effects, be it cyclone, be it heavy rainfall, be it flood, or so on, right? So essentially, IMD's color-coded warnings are the same for most of the adverse weather. Fair enough. Now, what are the value additions that you could give me here? Potential value additions. You can mention the cyclones that took place this year. You can tell me about Yas. You can tell me about Takute, right? So you give me the names of the cyclones that had incidents on India, and if you want, you can give me the timelines also, maybe the state, that sort of thing, right? Maybe you can tell me the ministry that IMD is over, right? So again, your core information from yearbook, from your static sources, that can also be helpful here, right? Whether or not you should be making a diagram for cyclone, not particularly, because it is not directly relevant, right? So if you make that would become slightly irrelevant for this question. Then the conclusion is that, okay, all of these warnings are universal. It is imperative, it is essential, so that people are able to plan, people and authorities both are able to plan and protect the citizens of the country. Fair enough. Simple, easy, and that's how you write your answers. Again, our objective here is just to be answering these questions, right? If you worry too much about writing extensively elaborate answers, then that gets us nowhere, right? You have to identify, this is the best that I can do, this is the arguments that I can come up with, and that will keep you safe. So if this is all that you wrote, it was perfectly fine. Now, the next question was question 6. Now, this was a slightly tricky one, right? Question 6 was discuss the natural resource potential of Deccan Trap. They asked you the natural resource, right? And then potential. Potential means resources that have not been utilized yet, resources that are not being exploited yet. And we are only worried about natural resources. So then the way that you would want to answer this is that your interpretation of natural resources is also important. Now, how do you begin? You begin with telling me what the Deccan Traps are. Right? Deccan Traps are a large feature of volcanic origin. Right? They're a basalt province. They're one of the largest volcanic features in the world. That sort of thing, of course, you can give me. Right? Perhaps you could have given me a small sketch of the Indian map and tell me where these Deccan Traps are found. Right? You tell me, okay, this region. Right? Essentially, Deccan Traps are found here. Fair enough. This counts as clear value addition. Now, the question was the natural resource potential of Deccan Traps, isn't it? So, what are the resources that can be found there but are still untapped? So, the first thing that you would be able to remember is that, okay, ONGC talks about shale gas reserves. Right? And this is for people who would be writing above average answers for some topic that they've already prepared. Right? So you would know about ONGC's shale gas reserve expectations. Right? Now, beyond this, I would want you to think logically. Apply your deduction to what happens in the Deccan Traps. So Deccan Traps were formed when Indian landmass passed over the Reunion hotspot. Fair enough. So the mantle plume from there gave us basaltic lava. It spread all over the Deccan region and it created what? A terraced topography. Right? Because one layer of lava, second layer of basaltic lava, so on and so forth. Right? And on the surface, it created a feature called Deccan Traps. Fair enough. What does that tell us? It means that this is igneous rock. This is in fact basaltic igneous rock. So what would you expect from basaltic igneous rock? One, you would expect, the first thing you would expect is what? Igneous rock. What does igneous rock have? Igneous rock will have high mineral content, isn't it? But it will be difficult to extract because of hard rock. Fair enough. So that's why potential resource. Then it will have fossil fuel reserves. Why? Because the landmass that was moving above the Reunion hotspot, that would be covered with vegetation and that would have animals on it. Right? And when it passed over the Reunion hotspot, those animals, those vegetation, that life would be submerged under lava. So that means what? All of that will get converted into fossil fuel. Right? So there can be what? Again, fossil fuel. So you extend from shale gas, you talk about fossil fuel also, you talk about mineral resources also. Now, you can also talk about, because these traps are in layered, because they are layered in nature, that means certain things will be trapped inside. So what can be trapped inside? You can have aquifers. You can have aquifers, water, groundwater, that can be trapped inside these Deccan Traps. So there can be potential of groundwater aquifers in this region, isn't it? Then what else? Beyond the genesis, the idea of how Deccan Traps came into being, now let us come to the current and present after the entire landmass got assimilated into India. Then what could be the arguments that we could have written? After that, we can talk about tidal power potential, right? Power potential, you can tell me tidal, you can tell me hydro because of the rivers, right? Then you can tell me what other potential. You can tell me about the monazite sand that was found. Again, this, if you remember from current affairs, then it is useful, right? Or if you know that, okay, we can have uranium veins that are expected here. So that is also a potential that is there. Again, all of these arguments are the ones that are possible. If you wrote anything along these lines, perfectly acceptable to me. Now, beyond these things, there are other ways of looking at natural resources also. One other interpretation can be, you can talk about the Western Ghats and its biodiversity itself as a natural resource, isn't it? Forests, the biodiversity, the animals, the plants, right? Everything that is found there, that can also be counted as a type of natural resource there. Fair enough. For the rain shadow regions beyond Western Ghats, the rain shadow region here, this can be useful for solar, right? Because lesser disruption. So again, the more you think about it, the more time you spend trying to figure out an argument, the better arguments you could give me, right? But this particular question I would classify slightly tricky because it's not something that we directly prepare. But again, you would be able to deduce a lot of the arguments that are possible just by a little bit of application of mind. Right, now the next question in this series was question 7. The next question in the series was question 7, and it reads, examine the potential of wind energy in India and explain the reasons for its limited spatial spread, right? So whatever introduction, body 1 was going to be what? The potential of wind energy. Wind energy potential, right? Your second paragraph, body paragraph 2 was going to be what? Reasons for limited spatial spread, right? Okay, so in the introduction you tell me, okay, what is the wind energy as a type of renewable source, right? So defined wind energy as a renewable source of energy. It is intermittent, it is dependent on site, so it is site specific. It uses turbines, whatever definition, whatever description you can come up with wind energy. For wind energy, it is acceptable to us. Now, about the wind energy potential. Now, for all of our renewable resources, be it solar, be it wind, be it geothermal, be it tidal, we do recommend that you prepare in advance what the potential is possible, because we have a clear shift that is happening in both priorities and generation capacities for the country, right? We have international requirements, we have international obligations, because of which we have to make the switch. So this was quite an expected thing that, okay, one of these renewables, the commission might ask. So what are the arguments you could make in the wind energy potential? You could tell me that, okay, India is the 4th largest installed capacity of wind energy in the world. Right, now if you remember the factoid, then it is useful. If you do not, then also it's okay, but the number is around 40 gigawatt, right? So the idea is that even if you do not remember the exact metric, at least a ballpark figure in a reasonably expected range is okay. Beyond that, you can talk to me about the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. That ministry's estimate that total potential in the country is about 120 gigawatt plus. It is actually 127, but 120 is fine for us, right? Now, in giving potential, sometimes static information is also useful to us. If you remember that the Indian coastline is 7,600 kilometers, then you can say all of this is useful. It is also having a potential for wind energy. So what am I saying? My point here is that sometimes it is not just current affairs based contemporary knowledge that helps us define the potential of a particular resource. Sometimes static statistics are also useful for us, right? We can elaborate, we can substantiate our arguments from static information also. Okay, what else could you have written in the potential? You could tell me that 95% of the potential is confined in 6 states, right? What states? Gujarat, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Madhya Pradesh, right? How many is it? And then one more, Andhra and Andhra, right? So if you're just making it like this, this sort of sketch is also acceptable to us, right? 6 states, 95%. All right. Now, once you've given me this part, that is enough for potential, right? For arguments enough, because essentially all you had to give me was what the scope for having wind energy in India is. Fair enough. Now, what are the reasons for its limited spatial spread? Now, some of this will be static, some of this will be application based. Why can we not have wind energy everywhere in the country? Why is it limited in certain regions? One will be core geographical reasons, right? We do have what? India is a monsoonal country, right? So we have monsoonal winds. What do monsoonal winds do? They will reverse directions, right? And is this reversal immediate and opposite? No, it is a gradual change in direction. So that means the wind direction is not fixed, it is irregular, it is varying, right? So this is reason number one, that we cannot have as much wind energy potential as we could, right? The second thing will be that, okay, we have to worry about land acquisition or land use. India is a large country, large population. We have agricultural practices, agricultural pressure, right? So that means the land itself on which the wind turbine will be made, it is under contestation, it is under this thing, competition from other ways of utilization. And at the same time, land acquisition for wind turbines, that itself is challenging. Why? Because there are multiple reasons, competing uses, right? Already this thing, high density of population, right, and settlement. Then environmental impact assessment is required, because what? Wind turbines have a lot of implications on the biodiversity of the region. That means that in that same region, we have to worry about the soil, the land, wildlife, the vegetation that is there. We have to worry about the birds, the flora, fauna, how it is getting impacted by these turbines. That sort of thing is also an issue. Worry about the offshore wind, energy distribution also. Why can we not have it offshore? We cannot have it offshore because we do not have the support infrastructure there. That needs to be developed. We need what? Subwater substations. We need transport capacity, that sort of thing, right? What else you could have told me? That, okay, the turbines themselves are at the risk of damage. Wind energy systems have the risk of damage, especially on the cyclone-prone eastern zone, right? So cyclones, hurricanes, these sort of things can also impact and damage the turbines that have been involved, right? What else? In North India, the issue is that we have a static air mass during half of the year. So there, we do not have a lot of wind energy that is available, right? The policies are still under development. We do not have clear, strict, sophisticated policies to support the wind, energy resource development, right? Beyond that, we also have competition from alternative renewable energies. So competition from solar, that sort of thing is also there. And beyond all of this, if you want to worry about high elevation, montane, wind energy, generation, there the problem is that our mountains themselves are what? Either very hard and low elevation, or the softer mountains that we have are extremely high elevation, right? Extremely high altitude and elevation both, right? And their development of infrastructure, development of support infrastructure, development of logistics is again very, very challenging. So these can be reasons for the limited spatial spread. Now, in this particular question, there is a star mark that is there. There is a secret, there is a implicit demand that is there. Anytime that you're telling me so many problems, so many problems, so many problems, I do expect as an examiner that you give me some way forward, you give me some solutions, you give me some suggestions. Right? Because you cannot harp on along the entire answer that, okay, wind energy is great, wind energy is wonderful, these are the things that can do, we have huge potential, but we have limited exploitation, limited spread. But there has to be a solution to this, right? So what can we do? Any one or two arguments here, because it is what? Something extra that you're giving. Since this is something extra marks for, extra content for above average marks, then one or two arguments are sufficient for me. But what could you do? You could have renewable purchase obligations from the discoms, right? They could be pre-mediated to be accepting of more wind energy. We can have tax exemptions, that sort of thing. You can have input tax credit for the generating companies so that their profit motives are improved. We can also have underwater development for that offshore wind energy. We can have that infrastructure, support infrastructure developed, and that can help our renewable electrification. Fair enough. Now, what are the conclusions and value addition that you can tell me? The conclusion tell me that, okay, wind has enormous potential, right? You can also tell me that, okay, our electrification is underway. We have what? We have doubled rural electrification, but still 20% of our country is still waiting electric resources, right? We are still in deficiency of electricity. That sort of thing you can do. Further value addition can be if you link this to COP26 targets, right? That we are going to have what? Net zero emissions by 2070, that sort of thing, right? The ability of being able to link these things to other parts of the syllabus, that is what will get you above average answers. So that is it for the 10 markers in the geography section. Now let's move on to the 15 markers. Okay. Question 14. Question 14 reads, what are the forces that influence ocean currents? Discuss their role in the fishing industries of the world. Now this one is a simple basic question, so that again reinforces our expectation, our identification, that if you study geography right from the basics, easy, simple, right, they're asking direct conceptual questions. What are the forces that influence ocean currents? You begin with what? Define ocean currents, right? Ocean currents are horizontal movement of water. You can tell me steady flow of ocean water one place to another. That's sort of permanent circulation cell. Anything that you've decided to write, anything that you've prepared, anything you can come up with. A simple definition of ocean current acceptable to us. Now, first part of body is going to be what? Factors affecting ocean current. Simple. What is it? It is insolation, the amount of sunlight that a place gets, which has implications on what? Temperature, rainfall, and therefore salinity, right? All of this will impact the water, the density of the water, and therefore it will cause movement. So the other thing you can write is density of water. Fair enough. What else? Wind and atmospheric pressure. Right? And what else? The land contour. Right? If you have the country like this and the ocean current is following the contour, that's why the direction, the nature of the ocean current is also influenced by the land contour. Right? So one more thing, Coriolis, the rotation of the earth, Coriolis force. Right? So these are the basic simple factors, clear static linkage, right? Now, what is their role in fishing industry in the world? Role in fishing industry. So you begin from the basic here, right? A lot of my students will remember that, okay, when a warm current interacts with a cold current, we will have high fishes, right? High occurrence of fisheries, high incidence of fishing industry. But for the purpose of this question, because it is asking for the concept of why that happens, let's quickly recap what exactly happens. In any water body, in a water body, in the top layer, this is called what? The photic zone. In the photic zone, you will have sunlight. This water will be warmer because of the sunlight, right? Therefore, there will be what? Phytoplankton, right? What will this phytoplankton do? It will do photosynthesis in the top layer, right? Phytoplankton over here will be doing photosynthesis, because of which the nutrients in the top layer will get used up, right? When that happens, now this will become a nutrient deficient zone, and that becomes the limiting factor in this region, right? Now what happens is, if say for example you have water from a cold current coming in from somewhere, right? You have a cold current ka water over here. This water will be higher density. It will sink at the interface. There will be turbulence. There will be intermixing. That intermixing in this zone will create what? Oxygenation, plus it will add nutrients. So therefore, the phytoplankton activity in this layer will increase. When that layer phytoplankton activity increase, that means that the fish will have a lot more food to eat. If fish has a lot more food to eat, naturally there will be more fish population, naturally there will be more fishing industry. If you give me this process, in maybe a block diagram or maybe a small paragraph, right? That will identify the core demand of the question, right? Maybe you draw a diagram of the photic zone and this sort of thing. If you understand the concept, you would be able to do this. Now, beyond these basic ideas of how and why ocean currents have an implication on fishing industries, you can also give me supportive points. Like what? Ocean currents bring in gametes, right? They transport reproductive cells across the oceans, right? What else? They also aid the migration of various species. The behavior of different species, say for example salmon, it goes against the ocean current. That sort of thing also happens, right? One more way of linking this to the fishing industry will also be that it enables the vessels, the ships, the boats to pass through this thing, international shipping zone. So that sort of thing you could have written. Now, beyond this core information, there is some amount of value addition that is also required for this question. What is the value addition? You could give me a very quick map, right? You could give me a very quick sketch map and tell me 1 or 2 regions in which a lot of fishing activity happens, right? If you identify these regions, it would be very useful to us, right? Again, if you could tell me the different currents that get mixed, hot and this warm and cold currents that get mixed, if you give me the names of these regions, that is also value addition here. You tell me about the Gulf Stream and the Labrador current, right? You tell me Kuroshio, Roshio, whatever names you can remember, if you quote, counts as value addition. Fair enough. So this is how you will write this answer. What the conclusion could be, you could give me a positive conclusion that, okay, fishing industries are very important for the world, and we should move towards consuming more fish, because 70% of the earth is covered with water, lesser land mass, so we should move towards more aquatic sources of food. That can be a positive conclusion. The negative conclusion can be that the climate change based disruptions of these ocean currents are reducing the amount of fish that are available. That is reducing the potentiality of the fishing sector. You can tell me about pollution, you can tell me about microbeads, anything like that. It works for me. But the idea is that you always make an IBC format, make a sandwich, make a clear flow of thought. Okay, now the next question was question 15. From geography, the next question we had was question 15, and it says, describing the distribution of rubber producing countries, indicate the major environmental issues faced by them, right? So again, Two parts that have been required. The first part is what? Describing the distribution of rubber producing agents. So rubber industry distribution, right? And the second one is what? Environmental issues. Fair enough. Now, in the introduction, what do you tell me? You can tell me about the rubber industry. Rubber is an important industrial raw material. Rubber is a tropical crop. Rubber comes from trees. That sort of thing you can tell me. Right. Now, distribution. It is an equatorial tropical crop. Right. Can you give me the temperature range? It has to be greater than 25 degrees. It requires high rainfall. That sort of thing you can tell me. Right. It is native to South America. Native to South America. Highest producer is Thailand. Number 2 is Indonesia. If you remember this sort of static information, it is always useful. Value addition here is going to be another world map. Right. One world map in which you're going to give me the equator, right? And then tell me that around the equator it is an equatorial crop. Where is it grown? It is grown in Brazil. It is grown in Africa. It will be grown in Thailand, this sort of region, and done. Right? So you're able to tell me where rubber is grown. Again, you should also mark for India where it is grown. Done. Clear value addition, clear understanding of the potential. Now, the environmental implications. What are the environmental implications? It is an agro-based industry, right? Agricultural-based industrial raw material. So what is that? The threat is extensive monoculture, right? That we are only growing one crop in the entire country, extensive monoculture, right? Deforestation to create more land for agriculture. Here you give me the example of Amazon rainforest, right? It is being depleted for monoculture. What else? It has high consumption of water. It has high consumption of nutrients for growth. Therefore, nutritional security in these regions are at risk, right? Then in the subparts of production of rubber. So rubber is not just the tree, but also the processing afterwards. So washing, vulcanization, right? All of that will use water, create carbon emission and create pollution, right? So that is also environmental implication of this thing, rubber production. What else? It will also have reduced total biomass. When there is deforestation, the total biomass will get reduced, and that's why what? Their work as a carbon sink, this will get reduced. Fair enough. What else? You can also talk about chemical pollution because of vulcanization, right? If that sort of process is happening. Now, beyond this basic understanding, beyond this implication, some of my students will also interpret this in a different way also. In addition to natural rubber, there is also artificial rubber that is there, right? Chemical rubber is also an industrial product. If you think about synthetic rubber, if you know where it is found, where it is produced, China, US and Japan, you can give me that also. You can give me implications of that sort of thing also as a chemical industry. But again, this counts as value addition. This counts as value addition. The map counts as value addition. The examples count as value addition. Right. Now, what is the conclusion here? The conclusion here can be, we need sustainable agro practices. We need sustainable land use. We can have land use planning nationally, internationally, and globally. Right? That sort of thing you can give me in your conclusion. Fair enough. Now, let's move on to the next question. The next question was question 16. Question 16 was mention the significance of Straits and Isthmus in international trade. Directly from current affairs, you all remember that, okay? That ship got stuck in the Suez Canal. We were expecting this question. It is here. So I want you to write this well. Fair enough. How do you start? You start with the definition of isthmus. You start with the definition of a strait, right? Isthmus is a narrow body of land connecting two large land masses. Strait is a narrow body of water connecting two large water bodies. Simple parallelism, right? Maybe some of my students will also give me a small diagram of each, right? And a simple example of each, right here in the introduction. Done and dusted. Now, the first paragraph is going to be the significance. Right? Now, some of you will write separately, significance of isthmus separately, significance of straits separately. But here you can also write it in one paragraph, not a problem at all. Primarily, the first significance, the best thing that they do is they reduce the time and distance. Well, distance and therefore time, and therefore what? Cost of transport. Essentially, right? That is the primary benefit of these two in this thing, international trade, right? And what does that do? That enables faster connectivity. Fair enough, you're able to connect these two regions faster. Now, the implications of these, the inclinations of this reduced distance is what will give you a lot of arguments here. So the people who found this challenging, how to write this one thing beyond this one idea, the issue was that you have to now elaborate, tell me how this helps in international trade in a further manner, right? So what can you write? You can tell me it connects oil producing regions to oil demanding regions, and then it should hit you that I would want to give the example of a strait from West Asian region. Fair enough. Now, it enables the faster, freer movement of cargo traffic, shorter distance. Here you can give me example, maybe Malacca Strait, quick, right? It acts as a gateway to regions. Tell me about Bosphorus Strait, how Mediterranean Sea is enabled. You tell me about Crimea, that sort of thing. Done. You tell me how it reduces carbon emission, because it has reduced time, reduced distance, reduced cost, right? Lesser expenditure of energy, because again you can tell me that the shipping industry is the least energy intensive, least polluting among all of these different types of transport. Fair enough. Then it also enables revenue generation. You remember that when Suez Canal, that Ever Given ship that got stuck, the losses that were there internationally were around what, $2 billion a day, that sort of thing, right? If you quote that figure, if you remember that figure, again counts as value addition. Simple value additions here, these diagrams, these simple examples, and as many examples of straits and isthmus that you could give me. If you mention Malacca Strait, Park Strait, Ormuz, Bab al-Mandab, you tell me this thing, Gibraltar, Bosphorus, all of these straits you give me, it counts as what? The value addition. Isthmus, you tell me Sinai, Kra, that sort of thing, again, very, very useful to us. Now, the next question would be question 17. Troposphere is a very significant atmospheric layer that determines weather processes. How? Right? So you introduce what is troposphere. The bottommost layer of the atmosphere, that sort of thing you can tell me. It is the lowest portion of the atmosphere. If you remember the height, that up to 12 kilometers, it counts as troposphere. Fair enough. Now, it is a significant atmospheric layer. Right? What is the significance? It is thin, but it has the highest energy, thermal energy, kinetic energy, right? It has compressed and dense air. It is heated up by the surface, right? It has dust. Dust acts as hygroscopic particle. Dust acts as the particle around which the water vapor will condense. That's why drops will get produced in this region. Clouds, therefore, will be formed in this region, right? Water vapor will be here. There is adiabatic lapse rate, you remember, 6.5 degrees per kilometer, that sort of thing you mentioned. What else? The largest amount of water vapor is here in this layer. Convection currents are produced in this layer, and it has direct contact with biosphere. So the biosphere, the direct contact with atmosphere will happen in the tropospheric region only. So this will be the points of significance. Now, it determines weather. Troposphere determines weather. Here you can tell me that, okay, wind takes place here, right? Cyclone will take place here. Rainfall, precipitation, snowfall, all of that will happen here. Fog and smog will be created here. So all of these different weather events, different weather elements, they all take place here, and that's why you should be able to name them in the second paragraph, right? In the conclusion, again, very static. Troposphere, all of these different types of parts of the atmosphere are important, they are significant, we should reduce pollution, that sort of thing you can write, right? So question 17, again, we would count as somewhat simple. Okay, now these were the questions from geography, and now we will move on to the questions from the society part of the paper. All right. Okay, the first question in society was question 8. Question 8 is explore and evaluate the impact of work from home on family relationships. Now, what does this tell us about the trend? It tells us that the commission is asking us about things that are contemporary in nature. Society is no longer limited to something that happened in the ancient part. We do not just worry about the ancient caste system and all those things. We are worried about contemporary issues now, things that are happening in the society now. How are they impacting different established institutions, right? Last time you had what? Gig economy and women workers. Now we have work from home and family relationships. So the introduction is going to be what? That COVID-19 led to a huge experiment in what? This thing, work from home thing, this thing. It was the largest experiment for work from home culture, right? You could also maybe tell me that work from home influences both work and life, work and personal life, that sort of thing, right? There was a sudden movement, there was a sudden migration to this type of work culture. Fair enough. Whatever description of work from home you could give me, it works as an introduction. Now, how does it impact family relationships? How do you define this? You tell me. Positive impact. Tell me negative impacts. And then we will also write how these impacts vary. Dimensions of variance. Right? Now, this type of analysis is something that you should be careful about, because they're saying explore and evaluate. This is evaluate, that is explore. Fair enough. Now, what are the positive impacts of work from home culture? Positives would be simple. First thing, spending more quality time with the family, right? So, quality time. Quality time will mean what? Better work-life balance, right? No commute time. You don't have to travel when you're working from home. So that means some time is saved. You can spend that time with the family. There was reverse migration. There was historic reverse migration during the COVID crisis. So what happened was, after lockdown was there, a lot of people went to their hometowns. They went back to their families. Even people who had been living away from home for many, many years, they went back. So that created more strength of the family. What will that happen? What will that lead to? Reverse migration. So reintegration of families, right? That will also result in what? Resolution of any discord. So if you had any fallout with your family, the cohabitation now, because of work from home, it enabled people to come closer to their family again, right? What else? Reintegration of joint family. Right? Better elderly care. Simply, if people move back with their families, with their parents, they're able to look after their elderly family members a little bit better. Plus, the perception of vulnerability in the COVID pandemic also underlined the amount of care that people are giving to their elderly family members. Beyond that, It will also be improved childcare, improved participation in childcare. Why? Because if earlier one parent was always at work, right, one parent was maybe at home, then the child saw very less of the parent who works outside, right? Or maybe if both parents were working, the child was there in a childcare institution, and now the child is spending a lot more time with the family. Fair enough. So these are some arguments you could have made for the positive impact of work from home on family relationships. Now, what are the negative impacts? Negative impacts can be forced cohabitation, prolonged confinement, right? And prolonged this thing, exposure to each other, prolonged contact will breed grounds for discord, right? People will begin to fight with each other because they are confined, because they are in a small space, because they are living together more than normal, right? Because there is lesser of what escape that is available. Then there can be burnout that was there. There can be work, this thing, professional burnout. There can be domestic burnout, overwork. If the responsibilities are undivided in the domestic this thing space, then there can be overburden on one member. It can be the female, it can be the male, whoever, but the person who's doing more work will feel more burdened. There will be low personal space for what? For the adults as well as for the children. Young children, young teenagers, say it, or so to say, they will also have extreme surveillance on their activities, right? You have to study all day, stop on being on your phone, that sort of thing could happen to them. Childcare's burden could also increase because now everybody in the family is at home. The child has to get educated, go to school at home. The child is not leaving the house. The child is getting cranky. You cannot have help, right? There is too much confinement. What else? There can be emotional exhaustion, right? People who are having to deal with a lot of family dynamics, again, that will create emotional exhaustion. Beyond all of that, there was also one important metric that came out, that the incidence of domestic violence. The incidence of the reporting of domestic violence went up a lot during this time, right? So all of these arguments are acceptable to us when you're analyzing the impact of work from home on family relationships. Now, what are the dimensions of variance? All of this will vary according to what? According to demography, the gender, marital status, age, education level, that sort of thing of the family members and the individual family itself. Beyond that, so the dimensions were what? Demographic, right? Variance. Then there is also economic variance, right? People with a larger house, people with more space would be, more resources would be more comfortable, right? People with more devices, essentially. If everybody has their own laptop, their own phone, their own device, a stable internet connection, then of course work from home is easier for everybody involved. Otherwise there is competition for resources, there is competition for devices. Fair enough. So this is how you could analyze the impact of work from home. And in the conclusion, what is the sort of thing that you could write? You could write that, okay, family is a core social institution. Somebody might want to touch upon the fact of, it is not always necessary that family is only one simple thing. People without a family, people who do not have blood relations, even they had some sense of family, some sense of support that was created by the society. COVID-19 brought about what? Both the positives and negatives of the world, and work from home enabled people to reintegrate with the society at a time when there was a lot of discord, there was a lot of distance that was involved, right? That sort of thing you could have written. Now again, I want to reiterate, it does not mean that you had all of this analysis ready in the exam scenario. If you wrote some of these points, right, I gave you 3 different paragraphs: positives, negatives, and analysis. If in the positives, if you wrote 3 or 4 arguments, if in negative, if you wrote 3 or 4 arguments, it was okay. So do not be so harsh on yourself that, no, I have to have 7 points here, 7 points here, and 4 more points. No, you have to have reasonable, realistic expectations from yourself. Okay, now, the next question was question 9. How is the growth of tier 2 cities related to the rise of a new middle class with an emphasis on consumption culture? Right? The introduction was going to be, okay, there is growth of tier 2 cities. Tell me what tier 2 cities are. You give me names. You give me Indore, you give me Ranchi, you give me Lucknow, so on and so forth. Right? Then the first paragraph is going to be, the first part of body is going to be rise of Tier 2 cities, right? How is it rising? Fair enough. And how is that leading to consumption culture? Right? Okay. So what is happening? We have a lot of tourism culture that is increasing, right? People want to move back to the tier 2 cities wherein a lot of tourism is happening. Then there is a lot of issue of, that there is better, lower pollution, there's better living conditions there, right? You can tell me that the cost of living is low in the tier 2 cities. Beyond that, you can tell me that because of the work from home culture, because of so much digitization, it is possible for people to work from a tier 2 city. That sort of thing is happening. More employment opportunities are being available. What else? Schemes like Udan, creating better logistic infrastructure, connectivity is also enabling the growth of tier 2 cities, right? Now, how is that leading to consumption culture? All of these issues, the growth of tier 2 cities will lead to an increase of consumption culture. How? Because tourism will bring in more demand, more disposable income. So there is more disposable income. They have new sources of credit. Disposable income. New sources of credit. Crowdfunding. JAM integration. Everybody has a bank account. We have digital banking. Digitization of economy. All of that is happening. Then all of this will create what? Higher spending capacity. Consumption culture has to have money. So the input is going to be money. So you have more consumption capacity. Then you have the process itself of consumption. How is that increased? The process will be increased by higher aspirations. There is a lot of exposure to upward mobility. There is a lot of exposure to what are the things that you want to buy, because there is social media influencing. There is a lot of aspirational growth that is happening in tier 2, right? So the consumption of luxury goods in tier 2 is also on the rise. Beyond that, we have startups and micro industries. Micro industries and startups are also under this thing, growth in tier 2 cities. I think in economic survey 18 and 19, we had this argument made that, okay, around half of the recognized startups come from tier 2 cities, that sort of thing. If you remember this factoid, you could have told me. Beyond that, you can also tell me because of e-commerce. E-commerce has enabled everybody access both upstream and downstream. So what does that mean? Everybody who lives as a consumer in the tier 2 city has the access to buy whatever they want through this thing, e-commerce. And at the same time, for producers, anybody who lives in a tier 2 city and has a startup, has a small manufacturing unit, they can also sell all across India because of e-commerce. And that's why their business will also grow. Their growth in tier 2 will also grow. Again, consumption culture, both in terms of production and also in terms of consumption, both. Then we also have, now we can move on to the output. What has happened? There is dietary change, right? There is economic transformation. We have the McDonaldization of tier 2 cities. That means that malls, the QSR chains, all these organizations, they are setting up their shop in tier 2 cities, and that's why the consumption patterns have changed. The dietary patterns have changed. We are now, everybody is consuming more cheese, more fat, more fast food, that sort of thing. Mobile penetration, you can write that everybody has a mobile phone. They would also want to have more than one mobile phone. They would also have luxury mobile phones. They also want accessories and so on and so forth. Everybody's consumption is rising, right? When all of this is happening, you can also add one more paragraph. Additionally, you might want to give me a small analysis also, that what are the positives and the negatives here. Right? In conclusion, or in your concluding remarks, you can tell me that it has negatives because so much consumption will again create more pollution, more carbon emission in that production. Right? It will have, even energy consumption will increase because of more development. It can also create value conflicts, right? People who are moving faster in their development beyond the capacity of the society to adjust with these changes, that will create value conflict. That's why we have various cases that are happening. All of that is happening. And then, of course, the positive is that because of all of this, we can only have our economic growth, we can have our economic development, we can have social transformation, we can have 5 trillion economy, reducing regionalism. All of that you can write here. What are value additions for this question? Value additions could be, if you tell me That thing about the economic survey, right? Economic surveys estimate for startups. Maybe you could tell me the range of population for a tier 2 city. 50,000 to 1 lakh is what is called a tier 2 city. Beyond that, you could tell me the names of the tier 2 cities and certain schemes and recognitions of tier 2 cities. For example, you mention Indore and you talk about the Swachh Sarvekshan. That sort of thing you can have in value addition. Okay. The next question was question 10. Question 10 was, given the diversities among tribal communities in India, in which specific contexts should they be considered a single category? So the introduction is, India is a diverse country. We have various tribal groups. Tribals are an important part of our country. Fair enough. First part of the body, that they have diversity. Diversity of tribes, right? Second part of the body is what? Singularity or single group of tribals. In what cases do we consider them to be a single category? So what is the diversity of tribals in India? We have linguistic diversity, we have cultural diversity, we have religion diversity, we have habitat diversity, we have interaction level diversity, sorry. So we also have economic diversity. So different dimensions of diversity we can enumerate. Linguistic, religious, assimilative, how much interaction do they have with the mainstream country, right? Cultural, economic, and so on. Now for all of these, you could give me simple examples, right? We have what? Santali language also, we have Ho also, we have those who speak Dravidian languages also, that sort of thing, right? So we have linguistic diversity of tribes. We have religious diversity of tribes. They have their own animism, they have ancestor worship, they have magic based religions, they have this thing, primitive religion, that sort of thing. And some of them, they also have converted into stronger religions not stronger, they've also converted into the majoritarian religions, right? The more established conventional religions, for example, they would have converted into Hinduism, Sanskritization, they would have converted into Buddhism, Jainism, they would have converted into Islam, right? That sort of thing you can tell me about the change of religion. Then in terms of habitat, assimilative diversity, some of these tribes are working with the mainstream population, some of these tribes are completely separate from the mainstream population. You can give me the example of the tribes in the Andaman, the Jaravas and all of those people, right? That okay, they do not interact with the normal mainstream human population. And on the other hand, if you want to talk about the Bishnoi tribe, if you want to talk about the other tribes, some sort of tribes that are producing products, right? Their interaction with the mainstream economy is there. Then culturally, they're very different, right? Every tribe will have a different culture. Here you can tell me Northeastern culture, you can tell me Naga culture, you can tell me Central Asian culture, Central Indian culture, sorry, that sort of thing you can tell me. You can tell me Dravidian culture, right? That sort of example. You can tell me economically they are different. Some of them will be hunter-gatherer tribes, some of them will be pastoral tribes, some of them will be agricultural tribes, some of them will be craft-based tribes. So there is a lot of diversity here. The more examples that you give me, the better marks you get here. Fair enough? Now, what are the contexts for their consideration as a single entity? Tribes have a lot of diversity, but when do we consider them a single entity? Number one reason is going to be in opposition to the majority. That as opposed to the mainstream majority, the tribals have to be a separate category because they are in complete opposition to the mainstream. The next thing can be as vulnerability to backwardness. So the second thing is vulnerability to backwardness, economic, and educational backwardness. Economic backwardness because they are at the periphery of the main economic system. They might not have a money economy and their products might not be marketed that strongly. They cannot have that much strong demand. They cannot have that much strong penetration of demand of their economic products. Beyond that, you can also have educational disabilities, educational vulnerability. If you remember the factoid from census 2011, the literacy rate for tribals is around 59%. So again, they're at a disadvantage, they're vulnerable, and all of these tribes are vulnerable. That's why they will be considered a single category. What else? The disproportionate impact of development. The incidence of the disproportionate impact of development. That, what does that mean? It means that for developmental activities, they might be required to give up a lot of their resources. The land, the forest, the natural resources will be taken away from the tribals, but the benefits will accrue to the greater good, right? It will accrue to the larger society, and that might not have that much representation of the tribal people. What I mean is that in order to construct a highway, if you had to take the lands away from the tribal people, it is not the tribal people who are going to use that highway. It will be the urban class, it will be the developed, it will be the majoritarian part of the society that would be using that highway. So that's why there is a disproportionate impact of the cost of development, right? The cost of development will be borne by the tribals, but the benefits will accrue to somebody else. Then what is there? What else? You can have disproportionate impact of development. Then the environmental impact is also disproportionate on them, right? Because if there is a lot of pollution, if there is a lot of degradation, if there is a lot of exploitation, the direct loss will be on the tribals who have more dependency on the environment, on the forest, on the land that is there. What else? They have higher vulnerability to crises. Vulnerability to crisis. Here you can talk about natural disasters. Here you can talk about COVID-19 pandemic, that sort of thing. All right. What else? Malnutrition and health indicators. There is higher incidence of anemia. There is higher incidence of nutritional deficiency. And diseases, you have this thing, susceptibility to nutritional deficiency diseases, infectious diseases. They have high infant mortality rates. They have lower life expectancy. That sort of thing you can tell me. And then one very important argument that you're going to make here is that they have to be considered a single category because we consider them a unique reservoir of culture. They have unique culture, they have unique traditions, they have unique lifestyle, and that's why it has to be created as a repository. It has to be saved as a heritage of the country. That's why they have to be considered a separate category. Now, value additions here are going to be the names of the different tribes, right? The history, maybe you give me a historical relevance. Tell me about the tribal rebellions and things, right? You can talk about the legislation, the constitutional provisions that are given for tribal empowerment, right? Maybe you can tell me about the forest rules. Done. Now, question 18. Analyze the salience. Analyze the salience. Salience is important of sect in the Indian society vis-a-vis caste, region and religion. Whenever they're giving you 3 different dimensions, I suggest you make 3 different paragraphs. Caste, region and religion, right? Introduction is going to be what? Define what a sect is. It is a subunit of religion. It is a subunit of social grouping in which it is a entirely religious organization in which people come together and have similar beliefs. Simple, straightforward. Now, in terms of caste, a sect which is caste based, what are the importance of that sect in that caste? What can it be? Stronger incidence of endogamy, stronger incidence of homogeneity. So, high homogeneity, right? Their beliefs will get more concentrated, right? Ancestor worship can be there and they can have a singular deity. You give me an example that, okay, they will have their own sants, they will have their own leaders that they're going to worship, right? Or they're going to hold in high regard also. That sort of thing also works. So we can have ancestor religious leaders, right? What else can happen? They can also have they can also be created from a need to change, from a reaction against orthodoxy. So against orthodoxy, it can happen. Fair enough. What else? They can be socio-political assertion, right? You can talk about the demands of reservation by different sects, different caste groups in different regions, and that's why there can be the salience in respect to socio-political assertion, right? So in first paragraph, maybe you have 4-5 points. Now, with region, How does the sect change with region? You can have the sects from the Dravidian region because they have similar culture, similar lifestyle. You can talk about the northeastern region, in which you can have tribal plus religion plus their own cultural practices which intermingle together and then form a separate sect, right? You can have a Christian tribe which has its own tribal culture and its Mizo heritage, and together it becomes what? It becomes one specific sect, right? There are also warrior sects within these different regions, right? You have one in Punjab in which the sword bearing people are there. That sort of thing is there. Again, one type of sect that can be created, it can be created from the idea of secessionism and separatism. If that is happening, then their political agenda, their social identity, and their cultural information, everything amalgamates into one single sect, right? Then with religion, you can have different sects, different norms around different religions. For Hinduism, you can tell me it is centered around different gods, right? You can have Vaishnavism, you can have Shaivism, you can have this thing, Krishna-based cult, that sort of thing, right? Then Islam. In Islam, you will have Shia, you've got Sunni, you've got Sufism, that sort of thing. You can mention that within that religion, you have these separate sects. In Jainism, depending upon the understanding of their history, you can have Digambar, Shwetambar. Excuse me. Then further, you can have it in Buddhism. You can talk about Mahayana, Hinayana. In Christianity, you can talk about it from the viewpoint that initially from outside India only we had Protestants and Catholics, right? They came into India, and again further sects were created, intermingled with religion, intermingled with region, intermingled with what timeline and what missionary came out, right? So again, you can make a large number of points, but the idea is 3 or 4 were sufficient, right? Value additions here are going to be as many examples that you can give me, as many sects you could give me. You tell me about the different sects, right? From Buddhism, Jainism, see, sometimes your preliminaries knowledge will also help. If you remember that, okay, Shwetambar, something was asked in prelims a few years ago. So you can pick up examples from there. Also, you can talk about Therwad, that sort of thing. Okay, now, how do you conclude that, okay, India has a lot of diversity, different sects are there. It allows for the accommodation of diversity because everybody is allowed to have their own interpretation, their own understanding of this thing, religion. Fair enough? Now, the next question was question 19. Question 19 reads, are tolerance, assimilation and pluralism the key elements in making an Indian form of secularism? Justify your answer. So the introduction is what? The Indian form of secularism. In the body, I want you to make 3 different paragraphs. Make one for tolerance. Then what is it? Assimilation. Assimilation. And you have pluralism. Right, so Indian secularism allows for all of these. How does Indian secularism have tolerance? We are accepting of foreigners. We have religion diversity and we have regional diversity. So tolerance is what? Foreigners, diversity, right? Coexistence of opposing beliefs also, right? You can have tribal culture and you can have mainstream culture at the same time, and sometimes they might be in opposition of what they think is right, right? You also have in contemporary life, you can also have, because of schemes and modus operandi of the government, you can have things like co-dining. So that breaks down the barriers that are there, right? Festivals, we have national festivals. You talk about the independence festivals, the national festivals and things. They go beyond the smaller identity, and that's why we are also tolerant about festivals that are not from our own culture. Right? If you have a different subgroup and they have that festival, all of these festivals will coexist. Done. The second paragraph can be on assimilation. Different people came to India and they assimilated into Indian culture. What is it? Again, coexistence of opposing cultures. People who came in from outside, again, coexisted with the Indian culture. And here you bring about a timeline. In the ancient India, you had the invaders that came in and some of them settled. Once they settled, you begin from the Aryans. The Aryans came and they settled, and now they form a part of India's genetic base, right? Then maybe you can talk about Alexander who came in, and then we had what? Hellenistic art, we had Gandhara art, that sort of thing, right? You can talk about Now, all of this from ancient medieval, right? Now, move to modern India. Modern India assimilation, Sardar Patel brought together all of these different states into one country, right? We had Nawabs who were there of a Hindu populace, that sort of thing. Value addition as an example. We also have tribal assimilation, tribals participating in the mainstream freedom movement. In the modern era, talk about Ganesh Chaturthi, talk about Durga Puja, that sort of thing, that different people come together and assimilate. If you go to Bombay, if you go and live in Maharashtra, you will participate in Ganesh festival, whatever religion you are from, right? If you go to Bengal, you will get assimilated in the culture of that place, because there is so much intensity, there is so much enthusiasm for those festivals, and then again by extension cultural practices. Now, pluralism, Indian philosophy, you can talk about Vasudev Kutumbakam, Sarvadharm Sambhav, that sort of thing. Value addition, festival celebration, again everybody celebrating their own type of festival, they're coexisting together. We have the synthesis of culture that comes apart, that comes into being because of the mixing of different types of culture. We have Indo-Saracenic, we have Indo-Persian, that sort of architecture, that sort of art. Contemporary examples you can also give me about pluralism. Talk about the modern workspace in which people of different identities come together and work. Talk about how in transport, talk about the Mumbai this thing, rail, right? In the train, everybody's together, everybody's helping each other. Then you can talk about tourism, everybody's going all throughout the country. We have the freedom of movement throughout the country. Talk about political representation. Our legislation is comprised of various type of different people coming together to form the legislation for the country. Then from COVID, you can give me example of pluralism. We had COVID langar, people coming together, helping each other, right? This thing, COVID's response, helping individuals and families in times of distress. So again, you can give me those examples of pluralism. Again, for this question, the more elaborate, the more articulate you are about these things, the better marks you're going to get. And now coming to the last question of this series, question 20 GS1 was, elucidate the relationship between globalization and new technology in a world of scarce resources with special reference to India. So the introduction is going to be what? That you define globalization and you can define new technology. And again, this is and or, right? You can pick one, you can pick both and define what this means. Now, what is the relationship between globalization and scarcity of resources? Relationship between globalization and scarcity, right? We have flow of information and data, right? There is knowledge intensive flow in globalization. There is importance of digital infrastructure. There is information flow. There is innovation flow. There is resource recycling, right? All of this is there. Why? Because of certain scarcity. So you give me the facts of globalization and then you give me a linkage to scarcity of resources. What is the scarcity of resources? There is a scarcity of data volume and quality of data as opposed to new technology. There is a scarcity of apex workers, right? If everything is replaceable by one programmer, then that programmer has to be highly skilled. And then there is scarcity of that sort of highly skilled individual, right? Then because of the importance of digital infrastructure, there is higher demand of digital infrastructure, digital devices, right? So these resources, the supply chain dependency, that is also increasing, and that's why scarcity of these resources is also increasing. Then because of the high demand of all of these resources, we have to move towards resource recycling. Now among these, if you're making 3-4 arguments, it is well and good for us, sufficient. Now, the second part of the paragraph is going to be the reference to India, right? How is it in reference to India, this relationship of globalization and scarce resources? For India, what it means is that we are susceptible to techno-colonization. We have techno-nationalism, both are brewing, right? Data identity, data localization, that sort of thing you could have written, right? We also have higher freedom of choice to the consumer. You have higher competitiveness in the industry, because of which we can have better performance of Indian industries. Beyond that, there will be greater participation of emerging economies, both as producers and as consumers of these new benefits of globalization with new technology. The role of small enterprises and individuals will increase because we are highly innovation dependent, we are highly talent dependent now. Beyond that, there will be freer exchange of content and services because of the higher connectivity that is there, right? Because of this new demand of skills, a higher demand of skills, there can also be a higher inequality that is created, not on an economic basis but now on a skill differential, and this can again lead to higher conflict in these new and emerging economies. At the same time, we can have media empowerment of certain vulnerable sections because of so much new tech that is there. There can be more involvement of vulnerable sections. The hashtag #MeToo movement can be an example here. Now, you can also give me an example of the biotech sector, right? How that during the COVID-19 pandemic, we had the direct dissemination of data of specifically scientific nature, the decoding of the genome. It happened faster because every economy, including the emerging economies, were able to give their benefits, their insight to the crisis to the best of their ability. All right. How do you conclude? You tell me that, okay, globalization is a never-ending force. Deglobalization forces are also there. We have various factors that are into play, and new technology is one more dimension of the same. Now, that is the end of this paper. These were the questions that were there. So essentially what we've understood is that if you pay focus to the base of your preparation, if you remember the centrality, the core concepts, you would be at a better position to be able to answer this question. Beyond that, our only requirement is that we try to write to the best of our ability. The idea is to push our brains, to push our understanding a little bit, try and analyze to the best of our ability, come up with these arguments. And again, I want to reiterate that you were not required to write all of these arguments. Select arguments the best you could do will put you at a good position to be able to clear the examination. All right. All the best for your results, and thank you for watching.